Whenever you're ready to drift off, settle your shoulders and let your breath slow. Tonight, let's quietly explore for small rooms of patient work. On a low cedar table, a wooden mold clicks shut around a paste as dark as a moonless pond. When it opens, a tiny stick of ink gleams like polished stone and keeps a secret of pine smoke and river water. Far away, before sunrise, a man listens to an underground trickle in a desert tunnel and guides water by the measure of his lamp. In a tiled workshop, a careful hand teaches clay to hold stars and vines. And on a misty coast, soft ribbons of cedar bark become warm baskets that remember rain. As you settle in for the night, I'll keep the pace unhurried. Simple words. Soft detail. Nothing sudden. We'll notice small textures, soot that stains a palm, sand that cools the air, a blade that finds a curve, and a fiber that learns to bend and return. These are quiet hours where tools are polite and motions repeat until they feel like breathing. If your mind is ready, we will begin where smoke and resin become a steady companion for brush and page and inkstick pressed to a song in an Anhui workshop by the water's edge. Let us go in with the first light, while the millwright is still thinking in a low voice, and the courtyard stones are cool to the touch. This is a riverside town in Anhui, when the air carries a faint sweetness of wet wood and early tea. A door slides aside with a modest scrape. Inside, the workshop feels like a calm chest. Wooden ribs in the beams overhead, shelves stacked with quiet rectangles, and a long table that holds the day's first tasks. At the back, a brazier wakes without a fuss. Pine chips, saved from carpenter's shavings and dried on the eaves, begin to smolder in a lidded pan. The smoke is guided across a copper hood so it can cool and fall as the fine soot that will become color. In another corner, a clay pot warms fish glue until it turns clear and willing. Someone lifts the lid to check, and a small cloud of steam kisses the room. These ingredients, pine smoke and patient glue, are ordinary on their own, and together they make a thing that travels far on a page. A worker rinses his hands in a shallow basin and dries them on a cloth that remembers many mornings. He measures soot and glue with a wooden scoop and a practiced eye, then mounds them together like a small hill on the cedar board. He kneads, folding the paste toward its center, turning it with the heels of his hands. The motion is slow and steady. The paste grows glossy and obedient, not too wet, not too dry, the way Bill learns to rise. It smells faintly of resin and river. On a nearby shelf, wooden molds wait in pairs like closed books. Their faces hold carved cranes, waves, clouds, and the mill's name in confident characters. Some patterns are simple, some intricate, but all are shallow enough to release. The worker dusts a brush of fine ish over the carvings to help the paste let go later. He rolls a portion of the black paste into a short log and settles it into one half of the mold. A second half comes down with a soft, satisfying click. A few breaths pass. When he opens it again, a newborn inkstick sits damp and perfect, edges proud, design clear. He lays the fresh stick on a lattice shelf so air can move around it. Long rows of sticks rest there, spaced like small sleepers, some only hours old, others cured for days or weeks. Ink must learn patience. It will harden slowly until it can be wrapped and stamped and sent to desks that do not yet know its name. An apprentice, his hair tied back with cotton string, carries a tray of yesterday's sticks toward the window. He turns them one by one so the undersides meet the morning and the day does its quiet work. At the test table, a slate inkstone waits with a smooth well and a shallow lake. The apprentice lifts a cured stick with 2 fingers and sets its end to the moistened stone. He makes small circles. The sound is gentle as a brush walking on silk. Water darkens from smoke gray to tea brown, then to true black with a hint of warmth. He pauses and studies the pool for a heartbeat, then adds a few more circles until the liquid is even and calm. A goat hair brush, already rinsed and shaped to a neat point, dips and drinks. He draws a line across a strip of paper steady, then thinner, then a hairline that still holds together. He writes the mill's name into characters and a date. The line sits with dignity, not bleeding, not pale. Near the door a rack holds brushes by length and hair. Fox for springy lines, goat for soft washes, mixed hair for everyday work. Each handle is smooth from years of turning between fingers. A shallow dish of alum sits near them, the way a kitchen keeps salt close at hand. On a small tray, tiny lacquer bowls cradle powders lamb-black for extra depth, a pinch of burnt umber for warmth if a scholar prefers it. There is no hurry. The inkstone will wait, the brush will wait, the work will ask and be answered. The foreman moves through the room with slippered steps. He checks the glue pot with a bamboo stick, lifts a lid to see how the pine is burning, and looks along the shelves to count the day's curing. He notes weather in a thin ledger, river high, clouds light, wind from the east. The record matters, because smoke changes with season, and Gu listens to warmth and damp. He adds a short remark that only the workers understand, shavings dry, paste supple. These few words will guide how long the sticks must rest before stamping. Stamping will come later, when each firm stick receives a frame of gilt characters, a border like a window, and perhaps a crane lifting through clouds. For now the room holds only the soft thud of kneading, the polite click of molds and the whisper of paper against the test brush. Somewhere a kettle begins to talk, and 2 small bowls of tea appear at the end of the table. The steam smells green and friendly. Hands pause, then return to their motions with the relaxed focus of a craft that has nothing to prove. Outside, the millwright turns its wheel with a sound like rain that has decided to stay. A boy sweeps the courtyard, pushing last night's leaves toward a corner where they will dry for kindling. He glances in and smiles at the rows of black sticks, as if they were small soldiers learning how to stand. An older worker shows him how to rub the test stick slower, to listen for the change in tone as the stone and the ink find agreement. The boy nods, tries again, and this time the line on the paper looks quiet and full. In many homes nearby, a scholar's desk holds for companions the brush, the inkstone, the paper, and the ink. Here at the mill, the ink is the traveler among them. It will leave this room wrapped in paper, banded with a thin printed label that tells its origin and blend. It will cross a river by boat, ride in a bundle on a porter's back, and arrive on a shelf where a hand will reach for it without ceremony, the way a hand reaches for a familiar cup. This may seem unusual today, when bottles wait with ready liquid, but in this time and place, making ink from a solid stick is a small, calming ritual. A minute of circles, a pool that darkens, a brush that wakes. For now, we remain with the kneading and the curing, the test lines and quiet adjustments. The morning lengthens. The smell of pine smoke is softer now, and the glue pot rests on the edge of the brazier to keep its even mood. On the lattice shelf, The first sticks of the day begin to lose their shine and gain their strength. The workshop breathes in cycles the same way you are breathing slow in, slow out, each motion teaching the next. By late morning the room leans toward its second rhythm. The kneading slows, and the shelves have taken on a quiet gravity. Sticks that were glossy an hour ago now hold a softer sheen, like river stones drying in shade. This is the time for stamping and gilt. On a side table, a tray of seals rests in a row. Each is carved from boxwood, the characters cut deep and tidy. One gives the mill's name. Another shows a pair of cranes facing a rising sun. A third is a small border of waves that can ring a stick like a bracelet. The foreman warms the seals briefly over a pan of water, not to heat them, only to remind the wood of breath. Beside them sits a shallow dish of size, a clear glue made thin so it will carry a whisper of color and hold it fast. A worker lifts a cured stick between finger and thumb, weighs it without thinking, and presses the first seal with even hands. The sound is a low kiss. The impression sits proud and clean. He takes up a second stamp to mark the batch number, season, soot source, glue blend, as if quietly telling the future where the stick began. When he sets the stamp aside, he taps the end of the stick with a fingernail. The note is small and bright. Hard enough. If it were dull, it would rest longer. If it were sharp as glass, it would have dried too quickly and might break on a stone. Across the table, gold waits like a secret. Thin leaf, sleeping between papers, looks dull until it moves. A soft brush lifts a square. Breath sets it down over the raised cranes. A squirrel hair tip teases the edges, and the leaf melts into the design as if laid by sunlight. The worker brushes away what does not cling, and a gentle comet of gold dust drifts into the air and settles back to the tray. On some sticks the border will shine in gold, on others a cinnabar wash will pick out the characters in a red that feels warm to the eye. The choice depends on the order sheet pinned to a beam with a bamboo skewer. Some scholars ask for restraint, others for a small festival of light. The apprentice brings a shallow bowl of black that is not ink, but lacquer darkened with a pinch of carbon. With a brush as thin as a reed, he paints a line along the bevel of a stick, turns it, paints again, and sets it down to dry. The edge will flash faintly when the light comes from the side. On a bench nearby, a boy grinds a little gold powder with a drop of glue on a porcelain saucer, pressing the brush in slow circles until the paste has no grit left. It smells clean, like nothing at all, the way water smells when it is only itself. In a corner, a small charcoal pan keeps a bamboo box warm. Inside lie sachets, paper envelopes folded around a pinch of spice. Not for every batch. Only for sticks promised as scented, a pinhead of Borneo or clove. A thread of musk if the order asks, and the mill can afford it. Later, one sachet will slip into a wrapper with the ink so the faintest perfume meets the owner when the band is cut. This may seem unusual now when bottles of ink open with a single twist, but in this room scent is a kind of courtesy. It does not perfume the writing, only the moment before it begins. The gilded sticks move to a rack where warmth can settle them, not heat. Heat would make the glue restless. Just the kind of air that remembers sunlight. The foreman shades a stick with his palm and looks from one angle, then another, checking for thin places in the leaf. He touches a gap with the brush and lays a breath's worth of gold, no more. When he is satisfied, he notes leaf true in the ledger with a narrow brush and sooted water. Ink is used to keep track of ink. At the far end of the room, the wrapping table is set. Papers cut to length sit in a staggered stack. Each sheet is printed at the top with the mill name, a woodcut of cranes over water, and a small rectangle where the blend will be written by hand. The papers feel crisp and a little soft, burnished with a smooth shell so they fold without cracking. A paste pot of rice glue rests in a larger bowl of warm water to keep it friendly. An older woman, her sleeves bound back with cloth bands, folds the first wrapper on a finished stick. The edges meet neatly, a brush lays a touch of glue, the paper closes with the quiet of a page turning. She adds the sachet if the order calls for it, then ties a cotton band around the middle with a quick practiced knot that lies flat and unassuming. She writes the blend name in tiny characters, pine soot, spring, Milrus water, and the band becomes a label. For a set of 4 she adds a paper slip listing the weights, so a scholar can match a favorite feel later. She lifts the bundle and passes it over a small pan where cedar ash smolders, and the faintest smoke drifts up. Not to scent it, only to ask the paper to forget the last of the glue and keep insects politely away. Outside, noon arrives without ceremony. 2 bowls of rice and greens find their way to the threshold. Workers sit on low stools and take their time. The talk is light and practical. The pine shavings were especially clean. The glue maker's pot did not cloud. The river has been kind this month. Someone tells a small story about a scholar who asked for a stick that would never wear out and agreed to laugh when told that no ink should outlast the words it makes. The foreman smiles at that and wipes his bowl with a bit of bread to make it clean. After the meal, the room turns to testing and packing. A tray of wrappers sits ready while the apprentice takes 3 sticks from the morning, 1 from the middle shelf, 1 from the lower, 1 from the top, different times. Different breezes to keep the sample honest. He rubs each on a stone with the same number of circles, 10, then 10 more, using the same water for all. He paints 3 lines on a strip of paper, then a small square filled in solid. He holds it by the window. The blacks match closely, deep but not blue, warm but not brown. He writes a small mark at the margin, then pins the strip behind the ledger page like a memory. Now the room receives a different kind of quiet. It is the quiet of departure. Bundles go into shallow wooden boxes lined with reed mats. Between layers, thin slots of cedar give the air a way to move. The foreman slides a paper list under the top band, Count Glenn's destination, and the name of the porter who will take them to the boat landing. He presses a red seal at the bottom, not gaudy, just a steady red square that says the mule will stand behind what it has made. Near the door, the boy from the courtyard practices with the test stone again. The older worker guides his hand. Listen, he says, not loudly, for the moment when the stone stops arguing. The boy makes smaller circles. The sound evens, almost like a breath. He smiles and sets the stick down for a rest. He will try again tomorrow. Skills learn in layers, the same way the sticks harden, the same way paper learns to drink the right amount and no more. Before the bundles leave, the foreman takes 1 finished stick and rubs it on a stone, just a little, as if to greet it in its new life. He lifts a brush and writes 3 characters on a scrap, quiet, river, house, nothing official. Only a reminder The Incas go into rooms where minds will make careful marks. He rinses the brush and settles it hair up in its rack. The scrap dries with a calm shine. Outside, the mill rush brightens toward afternoon. The boatman will come, the box will ride on a shoulder and then on water. A new hand will open a wrapper weeks from now. For today, the workshop returns to kneading and molding, stamping and gold, turning and testing, in the same slow pattern that brings a day to a good end. The drying loft is a slow clock. Its beams keep years, its floor keeps seasons, and the windows keep the weather's handwriting. Stairs rise from the back of the workshop, shallow and even, their treads polished by soft shoes and careful loads. The apprentice climbs with a tray of that morning's gilded sticks, the bundle balanced against his hips so they do not jostle. He moves in the center of the step, where wood is most sure, and pauses once to let his breath catch up with his hands. At the top, the loft opens like a quiet barn. Cedar racks stand in long rows, each shelf ribbed with thin slats to let the air move. Lattice shutters face the river, hinged to prop at angles, wider in dry months, narrower when the air carries rain. They are set today just so, letting a buttery strip of afternoon light fall across the nearest racks, while the far corners stay cool and shaded. A clay basin sits beneath the first window. It holds water to keep the loft from turning brittle in winter, or stones when the air is heavy, so the basin remembers weight but not damp. The room smells of cedar, old glue, and something like bread cooling warmth leaving slowly. The apprentice lays his tray on a bench and checks the small paper hanging from the closest rack. The slip lists the day and hour each shelf was filled. A thumbprint of pine stood in one corner for ceremony. He turns the sticks that were laid yesterday, half a rotation, so each side meets the same air and time. A cotton glove saves the guilt from the salt of fingers. The movement is unhurried. Lift, turn, settle, lift, turn, settle. The sticks make a tiny sound when set down, not a click, not a tap, more like a dry seed meeting a bowl. The rhythm steadies the room. On the wall, a narrow strip of bamboo hangs from a peg. Small notches run along its edge in pairs, rain, fair, fog, wind cut by a long-gone hand. Beside it, a paper chart shows the river heights taken at dawn on market days, the ink faint where sun finds it through the season. These notes guide the loft the way a ledger guides the shop. When the river runs full, shutters rest nearly closed to keep the air from tasting like a wet rope. When the river lowers and the fields open to heat, the shutters widen, and a mat hung in the window strains the breath of summer so it enters kinder. Along the far racks, older sticks sleep in neat files, their wrappers still off, edges showing that quiet lacquer line. Some will rest a fortnight, some longer, until the core is set all the way through. The foreman runs a test with a thin iron pin, not to pierce, only to listen. He touches a hidden face near the end. If the stick offers a crisp, dry welcome and sends the faintest tick to his finger, it is ready to meet paper. If the pin reports a dullness, the stick returns to its shelf to finish its thinking. Nothing here is hurried. Time joins the recipe the way glue does. One rack holds only scented batches wrapped in thin paper to keep their temper. Another rack keeps trial blends, pine soot from a different kiln, who boiled a little longer, a pinch of lamb-black to weight the tone. Each trial has a slip with a careful miniature, 3 lines, 1 wash, a small black square. The apprentice studies them sometimes, seeing the difference between near twins, learning to name a shade he feels in his throat rather than in his eye. A swallow's nest cups the top joist near the far shutter. The birds are not in, but their small music is written in the mud and straw. When they return in spring, they will draw a few soft circles in the air and then settle. The foreman allows them their home and sweeps after them. It is a bargain understood by all, a few feathers for a little company. A basket covered with cloth rests on a stool by the stairs. Inside are rice dumplings and pickled greens, a late meal to be shared when the sun loosens from the reach. For now the apprentice carries a small clay brazier to the window, sets a charcoal to embers, and warms the room by a breath. Not to change the temperature, only to keep the air polite as evening cools. He sets a stoneware cup nearby with a few dry tea leaves waiting for water. Below, the workshop softens. The kneading has ended. The glue pot has been fed a last pinch of ash to keep it clear for morning. Voices travel up through the stairwell in calm threads. Someone laughs once, not sharp, like a cork leaving a bottle. A broom draws a soft lane across the floorboards. The boy from the courtyard leans on the door and watches the river hold the color of a wet plum. The foreman joins the apprentice in the loft. He moves with the quiet rite of someone who knows where every step will land. He studies the shelves, tilts his head toward the shutters, and listens to the day with the back of his hand held in the light. "A little wide," he says gently, and the apprentice closes the left shutter by a finger's breadth. "Better," the foreman murmurs, though the difference would escape a stranger. He touches the paper chart, sees the river's mark from dawn, and writes a small note, air soft, leaf fall, shutters at third notch. They test a pair of sticks, one from high, one from low. On a traveling inkstone, the apprentice coaxes a pull and paints a short line on a sliver of paper. The foreman compares it with yesterday's slip. "Even," he says. "No haste in the heart." The apprentice smiles and sets the papers to dry on a string with tiny bamboo pegs that look like the legs of little birds. When the sun slips, the loft changes key. Shadows pull long between the racks, and gold leaf on morning sticks answers the last light with a quiet flare. The apprentice opens the basket, and they eat without ceremony warm dumplings, greens that taste like a friendly field, a piece of salted fish shared in 3 bites. Afterwards, the foreman pours hot water from a kettle he has brought up. Tea moves from dry to fragrant, and the cup warms to pairs of hands in turn. They speak of nothing that will chase sleep, the smell of the kiln roof after rain, the color of river stones in winter, the way an old brush points better if you allow it to dream in cool water for an hour. A breeze stirs the shutters and combs a draft across the racks. The apprentice walks the rows once more, palm hovering, checking for an even chill. He tucks a square of paper under one shelf where air lies to still. It will remind him to turn those sticks first in the morning. The foreman lowers the brazier to the coolest corner and settles a new ember to keep insects shy. A thin line of cedar ash ties the rooms sent together. Evening voices reach from the lane, a seller calling the last of his steamed buns, 2 women wishing each other a good night, the wheel of a cart admitting each seam in the cobbles. The miller slows its talk to a thicker note. Somewhere a fisherman knocks his oar against his boat in a slow, friendly rhythm to let the river know he is still there. The apprentice feels the day settle like silt in clear water. They close the shutters by 2 more notches. The loft dins to a kind gray. On the wall, The bamboo strip with its paired notches takes on the tone of old paper. The rocks hold their rows, the rows hold their small, dark travelers, the air holds the works and spoken agreement. We will come back tomorrow. Before they leave, the foreman draws a line on the ledger page for the loft. It is not a word, exactly more a mark that says enough. He adds the hour. The apprentice blows on the ember until it lies down and sleeps. They step down the stairs with empty hands and full lungs, carrying the slow weight of a good day into the dim shop. The door closes. The building keeps its watch with wood and cedar and the memories of pine smoke. The river turns its shoulder toward night. And on the rocks above, inksticks harden by the width of a thought, and then a thought more. Night is a second workshop. It works with cool air, with stillness, with the kind of time that stretches like silk pulled from a cocoon. When the foreman and the apprentice have gone, the building settles into its evening posture. Floors take back their quiet. Tools lean where they were left, as if listening. The kiln's ash gives off the last of its warmth and becomes nearly a memory in a brick. The night porter arrives with a soft knock, 3 taps on the lintel so the wood knows who it is. He is an older man with careful feet, a felt cap that holds its shape, and a lantern that eats oil in a polite way. He does not patrol so much as visit. First he greets the door bar, lifting it from its stones and laying it again so the weight can shift and be content. Then he moves through the shop without brushing the benches, every step a thumbprint of habit. He opens the ledger for the last time today and draws a small crescent in the lower margin. It means the shutters are set, the brazier is dark, and the rocks are steady. He writes the hour and his name, the way a river writes its bed by passing over it again and again. In a cupboard near the door he finds the moth screens gauze frames that fit over the lofts to lamps and sets them aside for morning. And Kate's wings, ash likes to hold what it should not. These screens make a small wall of patience against the night's visitors. There is a cat, narrow and certain, who considers the workshop hers. She arrives by the windowsill and steps down in one floating movement. She inspects the corner where rice husks once tempted a mouse, and, finding nothing urgent, curls by the cooling kiln. Her breath purrs like a distant shuttle. The porter tips his cap to her and continues. He climbs the stairs to the loft. The shutters are indeed at their third notch. He lifts one by a finger and thumb to peer toward the river. A strip of night water answers. A lantern bobs on a lowboat. 2 men talk in tones so even they might be humming. The porter closes the shutter again and sets a small clay cup of water near the driest shelf, not enough to wet, only enough to remind the air to be kind. He touches the racks with the back of his hand. They hold a cool that feels thorough, like a thought finished. Satisfied, he pulls the loft door nearly shut and wedges it with a folded paper so it will not clap if the breeze thinks of mischief. Back downstairs he tends the stones. There is a cupboard for the test inkstones, each with its personality. One smooth and round as a bean, one with a shallow pull and a tiny lip that keeps the wash steady, one rectangular with a surface that asks ink to slow down and deepen. He wipes each with a damp cloth and leaves a breath of water in the wells, so the morning will greet a surface ready to receive. This may seem unusual, leaving water where others might fear mildew, but here the stones are treated more like skin than like rock. They keep best if they remember moisture the way hands do. He checks the brush rack as well. A few practiced brushes have splayed, generous from use. He dips their hairs in clean water, forms the tips between thumb and finger until they look like herons' beaks, and lays them flat on a porcelain rest to sleep. The good brushes goat for soft washes, wool for crisp lines, a small mixed hair for testing characters. On the wrapper band stand bristle up, shoulder to shoulder in a wood cup, their handles wearing a varnish that only hands can make. Outside, the lane runs on. A late seller pushes a cart that says its own name. One wheel slightly oval makes a soft hop at every turn. At night soil man passes with his pole and buckets, the yoke talking to bone in a low, private way. Somewhere a lute tries a few notes and then decides that tomorrow will be a better audience. Over everything lies the millrace, a ribbon of talk that never insists, but never stops. In the back court, the soot shed sleeps. If the porter were to open the door, he would find the pine chips under their cover, the copper hood above the pan with its blackened throat, the stack of papers that keeps the soot clean as it settles. He leaves it be. Soot prefers not to be jostled. The shed holds its breath, the workshop holds its breath, the loft holds its breath, and the river does the breathing for all. The porter warms his hands over a small brazier lit only for him, and drinks two mouthfuls of tea from a lidded cup. He opens the bundle of wrappers dated for tomorrow, cut to size, printed with cranes, the band blank for blend names, and leafs through them by feel, counting out a half-day's worth so that the morning table can begin without thinking. He sets aside 3 wrappers with a faint watermark of ripples. Those will be used for scented sticks. The mark is a quiet sign to the woman who folds. He takes a moment at the window and looks out at the weak stars. Clouds lay a gauze on the sky. No dew, he says to himself. It means the air will stay even. The shutters will not need new thinking before dawn. He writes the words "no dew" in the margin of the loft chart, a tiny courtesy to whoever climbs the stairs first. At the foreman's bench, a slate lies beside a shallow bowl of dried blue scales. The porter sets a pebble on the slate so it will not warp as the night cools. He straightens the seals in their tray-mill name, cranes, waves and feels the relief dots under his finger pads the way a blind reader might greet friends. He rubs a thumb across one seal's back, where a carver left a cut that looks like a crescent moon. Small errors are often better companions than perfection. They let the hand know where it is. Midnight steps quietly over the threshold. The building hears it and gives no sign. In a cupboard under the stairs, the porter keeps a thin board scored with little troughs. In each trough there lies a pinch of dried scent, clove, cassia, a shred of aloes wood. He lifts the lid, closes it again without taking any, and smiles. It is enough to know that those notes are sleeping there. Too much fragrance would crowd the ink. A breath is plenty. He makes one more round. Ledger closed. Doorbar weighted. Kept content. Loft paper wedged. Brazier out. He pauses by the apprentice's practice sheet pinned above the stone. 3 lines, 1 wash a square, the difference between brothers. He nods to it approval, not for what is already good, but for the care that is learning how to be. Then he lowers the lantern wick so the flame turns small and disciplined like a pupil. The night deepens. A draft explores the sill, finds nothing to lift, and moves on. The millrace thickens its tone. The boat lanterns pass and go like eyes that blink without thought. Somewhere in the city a watchman taps a wooden clapper to tell the hour to anyone who is still awake. No one answers. The hour does not need a reply. Toward dawn, the porter hears the far sound that belongs only to morning, the first plank lifted from a market stall, the throat of a rooster deciding how it will be itself today, the thinnest scrape of broom bristles discovering yesterday's dust. He goes to the back gate, lifts the latch, and lets in the first of the day's air. It smells like water and strong. His lantern's light looks unnecessary beside it. He raises the wick once, tenderly, and blows it out so the smoke rises as a single, wishless thread. He pours the last of his tea into the brazier so the tiny bed of ash makes a quiet steam, then rubs his hands together as if brushing flour from them. His work has been holding, watching, reminding objects to be themselves. The building feels taller when someone has been paying attention to it. He places the door bar upright against the jamb, ready for lifting, and rests his hand on it a moment, as on an old friend's shoulder. Down at the river, a boatman ties off at the landing. He yawns into his sleeve, tightens a plank across the deck for the morning's boxes, and looks up toward the workshop. Smoke does not rise from its kiln, no need yet. But the shutters have that look they get only when night has been kind, a line of even dark, a straightness that tells him the rack slept well. He grins, though there is no one to see it, and sets the sweep oar against the gunwale. In a little while, the foreman and apprentice will come, and the day will open its hands again to knead glue and soot into song. The porter leaves by the side gate, boots whispering on the lane. Behind him, the workshop holds its breath for one last moment, and then takes the first, easy inhale of daylight. Morning opens the workshop the way a careful hand opens a book at the corner slowly, with a pause to feel the page. The apprentice lifts the bar, eases the door, and lets the first light walk in. He goes straight to the loft to read the night's work. Shutters at the third notch. Paper wedge still in place. The racks look even, their shadows soft, their burdens unharmed. He turns yesterday's rows a last time, then chooses a handful of sticks from the oldest shelf. They sound right in the hand, a dry, delicate weight, the whisper of finished things. On the main bench he lays a wrapping cloth, smooth and clean. Beside it he sets the tray of printed papers, the cranes ready to fly, the wave band poised to encircle. A porcelain saucer holds paste made from rice. It shines like a thin pearl. The sealing tray waits with its little family of stamps, no name, season, mark, a small cartouche carved with two clouds. He begins by listening. One by one, each finished stick meets the cloth. He checks edges, gilding, and the tiny raised characters on the face. He holds them near his cheek to read their coolness. A hairline crack would announce itself like a lie none do. Satisfied, he moves to wrap. Paper first. The printed side faces in, so the cranes protect the stick rather than show themselves. The fold is exact, bottom up, top down, left, then right. The paste brush is small, and its touch is modest. He seals the band around the middle with a single press of his thumb, then lifts the cloud stamp and beds it into a dish of dry pigment the color of old brick. He shakes it once to be sure it carries only enough, and presses. When he lifts, a soft red cloud rests on the band, a promise and a signature. The foreman writes the batch on the ledger. Pine, North Slope. Blue light? Late leaf season. He speaks the words aloud as he writes. The apprentice has learned to hear ratios in such phrases. A second page lists what the boatman will carry: 2 dozen scented, 2 dozen plain, 10 test sticks for a scholar crossriver, 3 for the schoolmaster who keeps their accounts honest by never asking for more than a fair price. A box of wrappers goes on the list as well. The bookseller downstream prefers to wrap in the same hand when he cuts a stick in half for a student's purse. Boxes come down from a high shelf. They are of thin poplar, plain smooth, made to breathe. Someone long ago carved a tiny notch inside each lid, a place for a cedar sliver that keeps moths doubtful. The apprentice lines the bottom with clean paper, lays sticks side by side with space enough for air to travel between them, then adds a second layer across the first like shingles. He repeats the cloud stamp on a card that rides atop the stack, then nests the card under a strip of twine tied with a flat knot that lies easy. The lid fits with a small sigh that says everything is in agreement. By the door, a porter waits with a shoulder yoke and 2 slat crates. His hands have the look of rope and road. He lifts each box as if it were an idea he respects. The foreman melts a bead of red wax in a brass spoon and seals a strip across each lid's edge. He takes the crane seal from the tray, presses it into the soft circle, and leaves the bird there to keep watch. A paper slip folded like a leaf hangs from each handle, mill name, destination, day, and the plain mark the boatman recognizes from the length of his arm. They walk to the river while the air is still cool. Sand crunches with a sound like salt. At the landing, the boatman from last night stands by his skiff, braid wound in a modest coil, hat brim cut wide to keep sun from making a judgment. The skiff is lined with reed mats to soften every ride. He squats to receive the boxes, sets them on small wooden risers that keep them from the wet of a breath, and lays a spare mat over all to guard against spray. He ties the crates with a flat hitch that does not bite, then sits back on his heels and reads the slips without hurrying. Bookseller, South Quay. Scholar, East Gate. Schoolhouse, Willow Lane. He nods each name the way one would greet a neighbor. The foreman pays him with coins the color of leaf prawns and receipt slips that carry the press's chop. Not much talk. The river does most of the speaking. The boat leaves the shore with a sound like silk pulled through a ring. The oar necks the water in even phrases. The boxes ride low and steady. Shore huts pass in a parade of thatch and pale walls. Ducks draw lines with their breasts and erase them with their tails. The skiff moves between reeds as through parted hair. A frog eyes the world with the calm of a clerk who has finished his page. At the first town, the bookseller receives his share. His shop is a long room with a table across its mouth to brush racks, and 1,000 sheets of paper stacked by weight and mood. He opens one box, tests one stick on his traveling stone, and smiles when the wash blooms with no grit, no temper, only velvet shadow opening to clear black. He signs the slip and slides the box onto a shelf between paper and thread, where it looks like an old friend seated between 2 other old friends. The skiff continues to the East Gate, where a scholar has been expecting a small parcel. His studio faces a courtyard with a bamboo clump that keeps the wind polite. On the pigment shelf stand bowls of vermilion and mineral blue. On the window ledge sleeps a paperweight shaped like a turtle that has never seen the sea. He opens the package with a bone knife and reads the wrappers as if tasting them. Cranes, wave band, red cloud. He sets one stick on a dish to admire its faces. raises it to the light so the black drinks a thin beam, and nods to the way the gilded characters are both shy and sure. He prepares his stone the way the workshop prepared the loft by offering kindness first. A water dropper shaped like a gourd lets a few beads into the well. He touches the stick to the stone's shallow lake, sets it down with the grace of a bowl, and begins in circles. Small ones, then larger, then small again. The sound is specific and comforting, the murmur of soot remembering its name. A fragrance rises, not perfume, not smoke, but the ghost of pine and glue the mill has persuaded into a marriage. The ink in the well gives up its brown and moves through the spectrum to gray, then to a body of black that looks full but not heavy. He lifts a goat hair brush, breathes into its tip as if it were a flute, and loads it. Paper waits. The first stroke is a test stroke, not for anyone's eye, only for the hand and the day. It lands and travels and lifts. The tail thins without breaking. The wash at its edge dries to a feather. He paints a second line, then a square, then a character that means quiet, not because he intends a poem, but because the stick seems to ask for the word it was made to keep. He stops to watch the light dry. The ink shows depth the way a pond does when the wind rests. When he dilutes it with a breath of water, it loosens into a friendly gray that never bruises. He adds a date with a small, respectful stamp, then sets the paper on a cord to leave its wetness where the air can find it. He wipes the stick on a clean cloth so its faces stay happy, lays it to sleep on a wooden rest, and writes a note on its wrapper band, South New, Autumn Pine. Even temper. The stick has joined his desk the way a new habit joins a morning quietly, and then as if it has always been there. Back at the workshop, the day folds itself forward. The apprentice cleans the gilt brush, writes the last line on the day's page, and hangs the brush upside down so it will not learn any bad angles. The foreman dampens a cloth and draws it across the bench in one patient sweep. The loft door opens to a new hour. Sticks turn again. Paste is covered. The cat inspects the brazier and rejects it, finding a sunspot on the sill better for today's nap. This is how objects make their way in the world in certain centuries, by being noticed without fuss, by being turned, wrapped, and sent without a speech. The ink that began as smoke has become water, has become word, and will become silence again when the page is read and folded away. This may seem too small to tell, but smallness is the language of craft. Many rooms like this give a city its steadiness without asking to be named. Outside, the river keeps its even spine. A basket seller calls in a key lower than yesterday's. A child counts sparrows in twos. The millrace resumes its thread of talk, joining the workshop to places it will never see. From soot that learned to sing, we slip underground to follow water that learns a patient road, where a tunnel keeper listens to the desert and teaches it to drink. Before sunrise, the oasis holds its breath. The palms are only shapes against a sky the color of coal clay. Dust rests where it chose to rest. No wind yet. A rooster thinks about voice and then decides to wait. Somewhere, a goat tugs at a rope once and gives up. The day is not open. A man in a woven cap ties a scarf over his mouth and nose. He lifts a small brass lamp and checks the wick. He tips a few drops of oil from a gourd and watches the thread drink. The flame takes with a polite nod. He sets the lamp inside a cut-out niche in the shaft wall so both hands can be free. On his waist he knots a rope. The knot is not large. It is flat and patient. It will sit between bone and cloth and not complain. On the ground beside the shaft lies a wooden pen cut from tamarisk, a short-handled hoe with an iron lip, and a leather water bottle that once had a goat's name. There is also a cord wound around a stick. At the end of the cord hangs a small weight shaped like a date stone made in metal. When the cord is released, the weight points straight down and tells the truth. It is a plumb bob, though he does not call it that. He calls it the straight thing. Names are for use. He lowers himself into the shaft with knees and feet against the wall. The shaft is a square a little wider than his shoulders, cut down through hard earth into a gentle cool. He moves as if the earth, and he agreed to this years ago. At the bottom he scrapes the last step into something even, slides sideways, and enters the tunnel. It is not tall. He cannot stand. He will not need to. The Foggara runs like a quiet sentence under the desert. It drops by a finger's width every long arm span, and it runs from the place where the ground remembers water toward the gardens that expect to live. Across the Sahara and beyond, people made many kinds of underground channels. Here they are called Foggaras. Nothing in this place is rushed. Gravity is the chief worker. The air smells of dust that has forgotten wind and of cool that has learned to stay. He sets the lamp on the ground and lets his eyes choose their new rules. The light does not throw hard shadows. It offers good advice to the clay. When he lifts the wooden pan, the pan makes a dry kiss with the floor. He takes the hoe and scrapes a line along the bed to find where silt has become a soft hill. He shifts the silt into the pan. The pan slides backward with a sighing sound. He empties it under the shaft where the sun will later find it. He moves in small sections. He knows each turn by the way the roof meets his hat. There is a place where the tunnel widens enough for two people to pass if neither mind. There is a place where a little vein of gypsum glitters like quiet frost, and he nods as he passes it, the way a walker nods to a familiar tree. When the lamp flame leans, he touches the wick with a twig until the flame stands up and remembers itself. Every few body lengths the roof opens into a throat of light. These are the shafts. From above, they are thumbprints in the desert. From below, they are moons. The man stops under each one to listen. If there is a whisper of sand, he waits. If there is a quiet nothing, he passes. He makes a small charcoal mark at the base of each shaft to say he was here today. The marks add up to a map that lives in time more than on paper. He unrolls the cord and lets the weight hang. The line is true. The floor is true enough. He reads the drop against a stick scored with tiny notches. He mutters the number and moves on. Sometimes the floor has risen where small collapses brought crumbs down. He scrapes until the slope feels like an even thought again. Sometimes the floor has sunk where a trickle was too eager. He pulls in a little clay, pats it with the back of the hoe, and leaves it to learn its duty. He drinks not much. He takes 2 short sips from the leather bottle and lets the water sit in his mouth before it moves along. He wipes the mouth of the bottle on his sleeve by habit. He wipes his face with the same sleeve. Cloaks in this place have many lives. Up above, The first bird calls in a thin, surprised way, as if the voice woke first and had to wake the bird after. The palms begin to look like palms instead of like plants. But still the tunnel keeps its own hour. The man's light grows into a small sun. The Foggara accepts it. He stops at a crosscut where this channel meets a second. The air is a little cooler there. On the wall someone long ago scratched 3 lines and a dot. The dot is time. It means that water to the left will be opened until a pot drips 3 bowls into a basin. Then the gate will be moved to the right. The dot tells no tale about whose bowls. The man knows a boy at the share stand will count them. Many oases measure water not only in measures of depth or weight, but in time bowls notches, or the shadow's movement on a marked stick. It is simple, exact, and does not need numbers to be a kind of mathematics. He wipes the chalk that has grown fuzzy, redraws the dot with the end of a charcoal reed, and nods to the idea of fairness. He looks at the gate, a board that slides in a slot. He touches the slot. Clay dust marks his finger in a soft collar. He takes a twig, cleans the track, and slides the board back and forth, just enough to keep its memory from hardening. He moves on. There is a place where the tunnel rises a little, crosses under a line of buried stone, and then drops again. The lamp does not like this. He cups the flame with his hand and teaches it to pass. There is a place where a bat, a guest with the right to be there, sleeps in a fold of roof. The man lowers the lamp so the bat will not feel day start in its face. He steps under with bent head, and the bat does not know. He reaches a shaft that opens to a garden. He can smell it before he sees the cool rot of last year's palm fronds, the sweetness of dates that hung too long and fell, the water smell that is not sea and not rain, but something the earth built from both. He sets the lamp below the shaft and climbs out into a small square world bordered by mud walls. A boy sits by a simple water clock. The clock is a bowl with a hole. It floats in a jar. When it fills and sinks, his stick moves 1 notch along a board. The boy counts softly to keep company with the bowl. He does not watch the man climb. He watches the bowl. This is his part of the oath. The keeper greets the boy, touches 2 fingers to the rim of the jar, and looks along the furrows. A strip of barley leans in the faintest breeze. The first light catches on its ear as if polishing it. A row of onions presses its thin hands together and waits. Date palms above hold their crowns on straight necks. Water walks where it is sent and nowhere else. The channels are only a hand's width wide, but they understand shape. They go left here, right there, and turn in a square to soak the roots that need soaking. The keeper kneels, pinches a bit of soil, presses it between finger and thumb, and nods. It is not muddy. It is not powder. It is ready. He descends again. The lamp wavers and recovers. He feels the day begin to warm the shafts. The breath of the tunnel shifts from the cool that has no edge to the cool that remembers heat and refuses it without anger. He smiles. The air will move now, slow as a camel under a load, but steady. The flame will need less coaxing. He stops at a place where the wall weeps. There is a tiny thread of water where there should not be one. He needs clay and straw from a pouch at his belt. He makes a small ribbon and presses it into the seam with the care of a mother teaching a child to lie down. He holds his palm there until the clay remembers to stick. He smooths it with a wet finger. He leans close. The weeping stops. He stays one beat longer to be sure. Then he writes a dot near the patch and draws a curved line like a smile. Tomorrow he will check it. Marks are how you talk to your own future. By the time he reaches the next shaft, the sun has cleared the palms. Heat will come later. For now the world is possible. He sits in the circle of light and eats a date, tearing it with teeth that know this work. He drops the pit in a small bag. Later, pits will feed the goat whose skin carried the water that carried the man. He stands, takes up the pan, and turns back toward the source. The tunnel's voice is the same. The lamp's ring of light is the same. His body is the same as yesterday, as the day before, as the day before that. Work teaches patience by making time the same shape many times in a row. Some call that boredom. Here it is peace. If this seems too simple for a story, consider that empires can fail where a slope of one finger's width in 40 steps keeps the town alive. The dessert knows which work matters. He moves on, counting shafts without thinking of numbers, and the Foggara keeps its steady fall toward gardens that are waiting to be taught again how to drink. He moves upslope toward the headworks. Here the tunnel is a little narrower and a little truer. The roof wears a thin skin of line where water has breathed on it for years. At one place the wall shows a pale veil like the inside of a shell. The man touches it with the back of his hand. Cool. The kind of cool that does not argue. He lowers the lamp and sees a line of tiny stalactites, each the length of a fingernail, each a slow thought written in stone. The floor begins to speak in a steadier trickle. He knows the source is near. The Foggara does not begin with a spring that leaps. It begins with a seeping that agrees to gather. The man comes to a low stone threshold, no higher than his palm. Water slips over it and remembers its shape. He kneels, sets the lamp on a ledge, and clears a caught feather and 3 grains of sand from the notch with a reed. The sound changes by a shade. Better. He takes out the straight thing again. He hangs it and watches. The plumb line rests against a wall scar that he and his father made years ago to show good fall. It matches. He nods to the father who is not here and is here in the way a notch can outlast a hand. A short gallery branches left. It ends at a blind, damp face where the rock gives only a little. The man runs his palm across it and leaves a dark smear that dries at its own speed. He will tell the sharekeeper that there is no new promise today. Some days the wall glistens and gives one more thread. Some days it keeps its counsel. Patience is the tool no one ever sees. He turns back and follows the main run to the mother shaft. This one is wider and has a wooden ladder that someone's grandfather once planed smooth. He sets the lamp in a niche, wipes his hands on his robe, and climbs. His head rises into air that tastes of sun. The platform around the shaft is a circle of packed earth with 3 stones set like seats. The sharekeeper sits on one. He is a quiet man with a beard the color of hay and a careful way of blinking as if he kept time with his eyes. Between them lies the headworks, a shallow basin cut in clay and faced with stone at the lip. From its mouth the water will pass into 2 small channels, east and west. and from those into smaller runs that serve garden after garden. Above the basin stands a board with notches and pegs. A cord is tied across the top with knots spaced like a story told in short lines. On the ground near the board rests the water clock, a wide bowl with a small hole punched in the center, a jar to float it in, and a smooth stick to mark each sinking. The boy from the garden has come up with his jar. He lifts the bowl, palms wet, and sets it on the water. It floats, then begins to drink in a thin thread. The sharekeeper moves a peg one place along the board and speaks a house name. He does not need to call out. Whoever is waiting already knows when they live on the board. To many, a clock is a wheel with teeth or a sun that pushes a shadow. Here time is a bowl with a habit. When it fills, it sinks. The stick counts how many times it chooses to go down. The number of sinkings is a rite with a story behind it. Lineage, work on the channels, a marriage, a gift to the mosque, many things can shake the count. What matters is that everyone present sees the same bowl do the same drowning. The keeper kneels and scrapes the headworks basin clean with a gourd half cut into a scoop. A few grains of blown sand hiss against stone and are gone. He dampens his palm and smooths the lip so water will fall even. He takes from a basket 3 lumps of clay wrapped in palm fiber. These will be plugs for small leaks where he finds them today. He sets them within reach. Beside them he lays a handful of straw that can act as a soft gate when a finer touch is needed. The sharekeeper lifts a thin board that sleeps in a slot across the main channel. He slides it. To finger widths, water obeys. It flows into the east run with a sound like silk being folded. A woman in a blue scarf appears at the far end of that run and gives a small sign with her chin. The sharekeeper nods back. He moves the peg to the first notch under the east side of the board. The bowl sinks. The stick moves. The woman will have water until the bowl has told its story 5 times. The tunnel keeper watches the lip and adjusts the gate by a hair so the line of water keeps its middle. He lays a straw twist across the west run to keep a ghost trickle from passing before its turn. He rests both hands flat on the clay and feels its talk. Warm on top, cool under. The right kind of damp. Clay that is in the mood to do work. A donkey stands with one hind foot cocked in the patch of shade the headworks throws. A man in a white cap pours tea from a dented kettle into glasses that look too thin for the world and yet belong here. He sets one glass by the sharekeeper's knee and one by the keeper's boot. The tea tastes of mint and grit and the iron of the kettle. It tastes like morning that has agreed to become day. Below them the bowl sinks for the second time. The boy raises his stick with his 2 fingers and moves the counting ring. A small knot on a cord slides closer to a pebble. No one rushes. A hawk writes a clean letter in the sky and flies on. Now the sharekeeper closes the east gate a shade and opens the west. The tiny straw bundle on the west run lifts and rolls aside. Water turns and accepts its new duty. At once 2 children shout from a garden with joy that does not offend anyone. Their mother hushes them with a hand and then laughs, and the sound is as light as the water itself. The keeper walks down the west run crouched. He touches places that might want attention. At a corner he presses a clay thumbprint over a hairline leak. He smooths it like a man combing a child's hair. He spares a lump for a crack near the east run as well. He sets a small stone in a notch where a careless heel might have troubled the edge. He passes the common basin where jars will be filled after the garden's drink. An old woman lifts her jug to show it, not asking, not begging, only reminding the world that this too is part of the day. The keeper nods. Her turn is known and will arrive. He returns to the headworks in time to see the bowl's rim reach level with the water. It twitches, hesitates, and slides under with a soft surrender. The boy grins as if the bowl had answered his private joke. The sharekeeper strokes his beard, moves a peg, and names the next house. The keeper shifts the board by a fingernail, and the stream thickens a little, then settles again into itself. Papers exist here, but not many are needed. The board with pegs is a book in wood. The bowl is a clock that floats the way truth floats, slowly, right side up, and then under with no argument. The talk is low. Disputes are rare and short. The sharekeeper keeps a little stick with 5 cuts on it for the time someone requires a reminder. He has not picked it up this week. That is a small good thing. By mid-morning the sun has gone to work, and the headworks rim begins to dry toward crust. The keeper drips a little water on it from his palm and pats it back to kindness. He eats a heel of bread and a date, then stands to stretch the tunnel out of his back. He looks across the groves, sees the first gleam from a copper pot at a tea stall, and the far glint of a child's bracelet. A man passes with a bundle of rushes tied neat. In this light every ordinary thing is a decision wisely kept. The bowl sinks again. The peg moves again. The water walks on. Before the heat reaches its fierce noon, the keeper will walk the line to the upper shafts, check to more gates, and meet a man who brought straw to trade for time in the evening run. He will sharpen the hoe with a flat file rubbed with oil. He will speak 10 words and make 50 small changes. He will go below again and listen to the dessert, learning, as always, to drink. By late morning the light turns heavy and bright, as if the sky were a brass tray left to knew the brazier. The shade that the headworks throws grows small and precious. A lizard visits it, thinks, and leaves. The keeper ties his scarf a little looser and blinks slow. Heat here does not shout. It settles. It asks for patience and gets it. He lifts the hoe and runs a thumb along the edge. The file in his pouch is a rectangle of iron with teeth like a quiet saw. He spits once into his palm, rubs a breath of oil from the corked gourd along the file, and draws the metal in short, even strokes. Not quick, not hard. The sound is a dry song without anger. When the lip brightens to a new line, he dusts it with his sleeve, lays the file back in cloth, and smiles as if a friend had stood up straighter. Tools answer care the way people do. A man arrives leading a donkey with a bale of straw bound in a net. The straw is pale and smells of last season's sun. The man's robe is clean at the hem in a way that says he walked carefully. He bows to the sharekeeper, lifts the bale with both hands, and sets it near the board with pegs. He speaks a house name and a request, a half bowl at the day's later turn to wash the threshing floor and wet the clay where grain will cure. The sharekeeper listens. His beard moves once with a single nod. He reaches to the cord, slides a knot the width of a barley grain, and sets a small twig beside the notch as a reminder. Return the basket, he says gently, And the man grins because of course he will. In places where formal coin is thin, trade can move like water, quiet, clean, exact. Straw for time, a Labor Day for a notch, a wedding's feast for a new gate when the old one fails. The book is a life lived in front of witnesses. The keeper walks the east run. The clay edges near the headworks are starting to fissure into harmless lace. He smooths them with a wetted palm and the heel of his hand, working outward in little circles the way you finish a jar. At a corner where a foot often turns, a shallow bruise in the bank invites mischief from water. He pinches a tiny sausage of straw-tempered clay, tucks it into the bruise and presses it home with the flat of a fig leaf. The leaf leaves a faint vein pattern that pleases him for no reason except that it looks like something grown. He crouches, rests his forearms on his thighs, and does nothing for 3 breaths. Listening is work. In the hush under the heat he hears the small rushing that means the slope is honest, and the smaller gurgle that means a pebble sits under the skin of the stream. He reaches a fingertip into the flow and nudges the pebble into view, sets it on the bank like a guest who has overstayed, and now politely leaves. By noon the bowl has sunk and risen enough times that the stick's notches stand like a soldier's steps. The boy's mouth has learned to count silently. His finger does the talking. The sharekeeper's tea glass has left 3 round prints on the packed earth, each one drying to the color of old leather. Flies visit and are shooed away with the edge of a woven fan. A camel passes beyond the wall, each foot a brief cloud. Its bell says here in the same tone it said yesterday. The keeper descends again into the Foggara on the west side, not because it is failing but because work grows delicate when sun grows stern. The tunnel gives him back the cool he left there. It is the kind of cool that is not a treat but a tool. The lamp goes ahead. He follows, knees teaching the rest of him to fold neatly. Inside, the clay smells faintly of rain borrowed from a story. The lamp's halo shows a seam that was shy in morning and now asked for attention. He needs a bit of clay from his pouch, breathes on it once, and spreads it with the pad of his thumb, making the seam a memory. A beetle slips by, patient as any pilgrim. He cups the flame to keep its opinion steady while he waits for the patch to take. The tunnel is not silent, it is only modest. He hears the cloth whisper of his sleeve, a drop traveling where it should, and the simple hush that holds the other sounds like a bowl holds water. At a junction, he finds a low place where fine silt has drifted back since morning. He scoops it into the tamarisk pan. The pan is a quiet friend now, its rim polished by hands that polish other things without meaning to. He drags it backward with a sighing sound and lifts the load up into the shaft's light. In this work, a man carries earth the way a bee carries nectar. Many trips, no complaint. He sits at the foot of a shaft and drinks a measured mouthful. He puts the stopper back in the gourd with care. First here is not a drama, it is a number. He wipes his mouth with 3 fingers and smooths the damp into his eyebrows because it feels true. Returning to the headworks, he finds the sharekeeper and a woman whose scarf is the color of baked figs studying the board. The woman wants the last bowl of the afternoon moved 1 notch later, when her cousin's donkey will return from the well with a broken strap replaced. The sharekeeper considers the pegs already standing like promises. He shifts a small one the width of a fingernail, slides another back, and ties a tiny knot in a reminder cord. He turns the board so the woman can see the arrangement straight. She nods, touches the wood, and leaves a date in thanks. The date sits on the headwork's lip and looks like a jewel. The keeper eats a crumb of cheese, folds the skin of his heel between finger and thumb to wake it kindly, and walks the west run to the common basin. A young man there has come with a stack of clay jars. He sets them in a row, mouths wrapped in cloth against dust. The keeper shows him where to place his feet so the bank stays bank and the channel stays channel. The young man repeats the steps without clumsiness. He learns fast because he has already failed elsewhere today and would rather not do so again. Afternoon light turns everything to a flatter tone, as if the world had been wiped with a cloth once and now waits to dry. The bowl sinks slower as heat thickens the water's mind. The sharekeeper allows 2 breaths between the moment the rim dips and the moment he moves a peg because fairness, too, can be softened by weather without being bent. The boy writes a house mark on a strip of palm with a sliver of charcoal. He blows on it as if to cool ink that does not need cooling. The gesture is inherited. A dust devil tries to assemble itself in the far date grove, wobbles, and fails. Shade creeps back toward edges. The keeper lifts the small straw bundle he used as a ghost gate and wrings it out, letting its damp make a dark flower on the packed clay. He sets it in the sun where it will forget its shape and learn another tomorrow. He checks the straight thing once more at the headwork's lip, not because he doubts, but because trust is a habit made of maniacs. The line is still true. He smiles for the second time today and hides it so no one will think him foolish. A last small repair at the place where the east and west runs split. Tiny eddies write little circles that, over days, could grow into a bite. He pinches dust into the water with 2 fingers, watches how the circles pull it, and lays a pebble the size of a pigeon's eye exactly where the pull will dress the flow into clean ribbon. It works at once. He bows to the pebble. It does not care. That is part of why it works. By the time the sun leans toward gold, the board has only 3 pegs left to move. The straw trade waits its agreed half-bowl. The mark on the cord remembers. The donkey with the new strap returns, strap a proud darker line on a pale back. The young man with jars has learned to step like a cat. The boy with the stick yawns once and hides it behind the bowl. Heat loosens its hold without apology. The headwork's rim, patted all day, looks like a loaf baked smooth. The keeper straightens, rolls his shoulders under the robe until they click in friendly ways, and rinses his hands in a trickle. He leaves his palms damp. Dust will stick less. Work in the afternoon is like embroidery on cloth that is already woven, small, exact, the last touches that make the whole. He lifts the board a hair, lowers it, breathes, and lets the bowl teach the rest. Late light slips from brass to honey. Shadows of palms grow long and straight like calm fingers pointing home. Heat lets go in small pieces, and the headworks begins to breathe again. The sharekeeper lifts his face once, as if to taste the change, and sets the board for the last turns of the day. On a cord at the corner, the tiny knot tied for the straw trade waits where it should. The man with the new strap returns leading the same donkey, the animal quieter now, strapped dark against its pale coat. He salutes with 2 fingers near his brow and stands aside while the bowl completes a sinking for a house whose turn is nearly done. The boy watches the rim touch, hesitate, and fold. He moves the counting ring and says the next name softly, like reading from memory. The sharekeeper shifts the gate a shade. Water bends to the west run. The straw man sets his bale closer, cuts the net with a knife that flashes once, and lifts 2 armfuls to the headwork's lip. The keeper takes the straw without ceremony, spreads a thin mat of it where feet often step, and tucks a twist into a fragile place along the east bank as a kindness that will hold until morning clayim. Aches it whole, the peg moves to the notch marked with the twig. The bowl floats again. This is the half-share promised. For a little while the sound of water grows round and full. 2 women come with a wide sieve and wash a threshing floor with motions learned from their mothers. Straw darkens, then shines. The donkey leans his head against the man's shoulder. A child walks heel to toe along the edge of shade and counts his steps toward no one. The keeper kneels and runs his palm over the straw mat he just made. It lies like a small field. He presses 3 places with the heel of his hand so the straw learns to stay. He leaves the last twist across a nick in the lip, pins it with a smooth pebble, and wipes his fingers on his robe with the practiced flick of someone who has done this through many seasons. Straw for time, time for water, water for life. No one says it out loud. They just look at the bowl and let it speak. Far off, a thin call carries from a courtyard soft and high, not urgent. The grove answers with a brief breeze, as if someone had turned the page in a large, quiet book. In many oases, evening marks both prayer and work ceasing. Here, the sound folds into the day like a stitch that closes a scene. You notice it, and then it becomes part of the cloth. The sharekeeper touches the board's top edge, moves a final peg to the east, and nods to the keeper. The last full bowl will go to the gardens that drink slowly. The keeper adjusts the gate by a breath. The stream smooths and holds like silk pulled straight. He watches it for the space of 5 heartbeats, the kind of counting that does not live in numbers. He takes up his hoe, checks its bright edge with his thumb, and walks the run one last time, leaving prints that the evening breeze will partly erase. At the common basin, jars wait wrapped in cloth against dust. He shows a young girl how to lift hers to the lip and tilt without bumping the bank. She listens, tries, and manages a clean pour that leaves no gouge. He praises her with a short word and a smile she can keep. When the bowl sinks for the straw share, the boy raises the stick and taps its end on the packed earth twice. This is the sign for a half. The sharekeeper slides the reminder twig out and returns it to the bundle of markers. He strokes the cord knot that helped him remember. The knot is no longer needed, but it can live there until morning. Knots remember without taking space in anyone's head. The keeper sits on one of the headwork stones and eats the last date from his pouch. He saves the pit and drops it by the wall where others have fallen. Some of those have turned to trees. It pleases him to think of that without asking for it. He drinks 2 fingers of water from the gourd and caps it. The gourd is light now. He will fill it in a moment from the common basin with thanks to the last house's patience. The light slips to copper, then to a soft tin. The board has 1 peg left, and then none. The sharekeeper wipes the peg faces with his sleeve and sets them in their small box. He closes the gate to a whisper and turns the board sideways so no night wanderer will mistake the day's shape for the next. The boy folds the cloth of the bowl and sets it upside down on the jar so its rim will dry clean. The stick goes into its notch with the quiet click of a right thing in a right place. Now the keeper takes his lamp and straight thing and walks the line of shafts homeward, closing the day behind him. The mother shaft is first. He lowers himself until the lamp finds the tunnel shoulder, steps into the cool, and lets the heat of the headworks fall off his skin the way a coat slips from a peg. Inside, the fogger carries a narrow, even voice. He passes the place patched at noon and touches it. The clay has skinned over and looks like a small moon that decided to live in a wall. He nods to it and keeps on. At the next shaft he pauses and looks up. Sky at the top is a round coin blue as a date stone. A bird crosses it and is gone. At each minor shaft he does the same simple litany. Lap forward, listen, touch the bank, smooth a bruise, lift a pebble, set a straw hair, wear sea masks. He clears the floor with the tamarisk pan only where feet would otherwise trip. He does not overwork what does not need it. Care here is measured, excess is another kind of waste. At the last shaft before the head source, he stops. He hangs the straight thing, watches the plum wine settle against the old scar, and feels the small relief he always does when the cut tells the same truth as yesterday. He laughs once under his breath. A secret laugh needs no reason. The head source is a damp face in a low chamber where rock and patience have agreed to a treaty. He bows his head to enter, sets the lamp on a flat stone, and crouches. The seep writes a slow letter across the floor and into the channel. He clears a few fine grains from the lip, breathes on the tiny threshold, and lays the lamp so its shadow does not confuse the surface. The trickle remains steady, no rush, no sulk. He sits back on his heels and lets the cool talk to his bones. When he climbs, night has taken the groves without a fuss. The air smells of date pollen and dust and the faint iron of the ladder. Stars arrive in groups, not in a crowd. A long line of shafts runs away across the desert like a dotted sentence the earth is writing to itself. Each circle is a pause, the whole is a meaning. Back at the headworks, the sharekeeper has wrapped the board. The boy has gone home. The donkey sleeps with one ear working separately, as donkeys do. The keeper closes the small side gates so nothing wanders that should not. He smooths the lip with a wet palm for morning's first touch. He sits and writes 3 marks on the noteboard. 1 for the patch at the west rung, 1 for the straw trade done, and 1 for a tiny crack he will finish tomorrow with better clay. He ties a single knot in a loose cord to remember the crack without ink. He carries his tools to their places. The hoe goes blade down into sand. The file returns to its cloth. The straight thing hangs from its peg where the line of the plum will not be offended overnight. He empties the lamp's cup of soot with a fingernail, trims the wick with 2 patient pinches, and refills it from the skin. He lights it, watches the flame find its low, even mind, then lifts it to eye height and turns so the light checks the headwork's lip one last time for shadow hollows. It shows none. He blows the flame out with a breath that knows how and stands for a moment while the dark rebuilds itself around him. The sky has put on every star it owns. The palm stand is black lace against it. Somewhere a jar lid clicks. Somewhere a child says one last thing. The fogger below holds its thin song and will keep it all night. He touches the headwork stone with the flat of his hand, a habit, a thanks, and steps away, leaving the channels asleep in their lines. Before the first color returns to the east, he wakes to the kind of chill that asks for two slow breaths and a shawl. Sand remembers coolness at night, the way a bowl remembers water. He folds his blanket, sets his palm against the packed earth floor to feel the temperature of the day beginning, and smiles at its small promise. Stars are not gone yet. They drift back step by step, like people who know they are leaving but linger at the door. At the headworks he pauses. The stones hold a faint shine from dew. His hand finds the smooth lip as easily as a key finds a lock it made. He sets the lamp down, trims the wick by feel to careful pinches, and a twist and coaxes a soft flame into being. The light lifts the darkness without wounding it. He tilts the lamp so its glow slides along the clay skin. No cracks grew in the night. The ghost gate of straw he wrung yesterday lies where he left it, now dry, flat, and harmless. A shadow appears at the gate, the sharekeeper, robe drawn close, beard cool with dew. He carries the board wrapped in linen, and the small box of pegs that is more valuable than it looks. They greet each other with two words that are half sound, half breath. The board unwraps, the linen folds itself into a neat square as if it enjoys the job, and pegs rattle once like little bones and fall still. Together, without hurry, they set the day. The sharekeeper lifts yesterday's charcoal, rubs it on his palm to warm it, and draws a thin line across the board's edge where the sun will be at noon. No one will see it later, but he will. He loosens the memory knot in the reminder cord from last night's note about the small crack and readies nothing, because the work is done. He hands the knot to the boy when the boy arrives. The boy plays with it in his pocket while pretending not to. The keeper goes to the near basin and rinses the bowl with two hands, turning it in the water, watching dust leave in gray veils that do not complain. He lifts the bowl, lets it drip until the rin speaks in slow beads, and sets it to float. He lowers the board one finger's width and watches the surface respond. It is a conversation he has each morning, polite, brief, exact. When the bowl settles, he notes the time with a look at the sky's first lighter patch. The day agrees to begin. As light grows, the small procession of ordinary returns assembles itself. The man with the donkey brings back the empty straw net neatly rolled. He sets it beside the headworks and nods at the sharekeeper, who nods back with the weight of a promise completed. The strap holds. He touches it once like a friend's shoulder. The woman with the fig-colored scarf brings a small loaf wrapped in a cloth for the sharekeeper's house. The cloth is embroidered with a stitch that runs like a tiny irrigation channel. She leaves it without speaking and looks at the board as if it were a page from which she has been reading for years. A young girl arrives with yesterday's jar, scrubbed and wrapped. She carries it by the neck with the practiced swing of someone who has been trusted early. The keeper takes it, tips it to the light, and shows her the way the rim must be without a chip. She nods. He fills the gourd from the common basin, caps it, and sets it in the shade of the headwork stone where gourds like to think. Now he climbs. The lamp goes at his belt, the straight thing rides his shoulder. Down the mother shaft into the cool. The tunnel meets him with its remembered breath, a temperature that is hard to name and easy to love. He carries no hurry. Work in the early hour is a smoothing, not a correction. He touches last evening's patch. It is firm and slightly darker. He lays two fingers on it and says the small words some men keep for tools and children. The Foggara answers by not answering. at a bend where small eddies had started their politics. He lifts a pebble from his pouch, a smooth one he chose long ago because it feels like the pad of a thumb, and sets it at a slight angle. The flow changes its mind in a patient way, and the eddies stand down. He draws the tamarisk pan along the floor once, twice, and the mouthfuls of silt he lifts make a polite scrape that leaves the channel clear and self-respecting. He does not try to make it new. He tries to remind it of what it already knows. At the second shaft he checks the line. The straight thing hangs, the plumb swings, and settles, nose to the old scar. The distance between yesterday and today is a barley grain. This is good. He takes the charcoal nub from his pouch and pricks a tiny dot half the size of a date seed beside the scar. The wall now bears days like rings in a tree, counted only by those who know where to look. By the time he comes up, the sky is milk blue. Palms hold their deeper color at the edges of light like coal by an eye. The sharekeeper has placed the first 3 pegs for houses that rise early to stir clay and wash tools. The bowl sinks and rises with authority. The boy taps the stick softly at each touch of the ring, and the sound is so familiar it might be mistaken for silence. They break bread together, to small pieces each, a smear of yesterday's cheese that tastes of sheep and sun, 3 olives that look like thoughts. The keeper chews the first slowly and lets the salt speak to his morning. He takes a pebble from the headworks ledge and sets it at the corner of the board as a temporary foot, so the board stands exactly true on the packed earth. He is not the kind of man who trusts a good thing to luck when a stone will do. He mixes a final thumb of patching clay for the tiny crack he marked last night with a knot. He uses better earth for this, sifted and kept in a gourd with a wooden stopper. He adds a pinch of straw he rubbed between his palms until it is almost hair and a breath of ash from the lamp. He kneads it until it smells like rain imagined. He smooths the crack with the pad of a fig leaf again, the veins leaving their ghost. When it is done, the scene looks like a wrinkle at the corner of an eye that has laughed more than it cried. There is a small blessing he learned as a child, not a prayer exactly, not a rule. It is to wet hands brought together and then opened over the channel, palms down, as if releasing a bird that never needed catching. He does it now without looking to see who watches. The sharekeeper pretends not to see. The boy sees and will one day do the same and pretend not to remember where he learned it. People come and go in the first golden hour. A neighbor brings a new sieve to show, its weave tighter, its frame trimmed smooth with a shard of bottle glass. A boy from a farther house watches the board as if it were a game, then asks to move a peg under the sharekeeper's eye. He does it with the carefulness of someone carrying a full bowl. No water spills. The sharekeeper makes a mark beside the boy's family sign. Everyone knows what that means and says nothing. The keeper takes a last walk along the east run, not because he needs to, but because it is his way of tying the morning tight. The bank holds. The straw mat he let dry is now part of the path. He lifts and resets one small pebble, not because it is wrong, but because it will be better the other way around. He steps back and looks at the small, ordinary perfection of a stream obeying itself. He returns to the headworks. The sharekeeper folds the linen over the board's open side to keep sun from striking it directly and drying the wood unevenly. The boy sits, knees up, stick across them, and hums a tune that has no notes, only patience. The keeper hangs the straight thing on its peg where the line will rest true, tucks the file deeper in its cloth so morning light will not find it, and give it ideas about rust, and sets the lamp on its shelf, wick-trimmed, oil-topped, soot-ring-wagged. He writes on the small slate 2 words that are not quite words, one for slope good, one for patch done. He draws at the bottom edge a row of tiny dots that any stranger would take for nothing. He and the sharekeeper will know for years that it means the day began well when the sun sets its first bright thumb on the top leaves of the date palms. He stands. He lays his palm on the headwork stone, flat, warm, grateful. He feels the faint tremble of water somewhere below a muscle under skin and nods to it as to an animal that lives with him by choice. The day moves on without him needing to hold it in both hands. He steps back into his own shadow and out again, like a man testing the sole of a new sandal. The groove he walks from headworks to home is shallow and clean. He knows it by heart. It will know him when he is old. From this quiet geometry of sand and water, let us drift to another kind of measure lines of light and shade cut into clay where, in a courtyard at Granada, a steady blade teaches tiles to fit the sky. Mid-afternoon brings a quiet the room knows. Voices in the courtyard thin, the fountain speaks louder by comparison. The kiln softens from orange to the kind of bright that has weight. The fireman eases the stoke and lets the dome soak keep moving from skin to heart. Through the aisle witness shard shows the blue with a tiny pool that has flattened. Enough, the cutter says, and the fireman nods as if agreeing to end a pleasant talk. They close the drafts and seal the mouth with a last small brick. Heat will fall as a mountain does, slowly with dignity. No one pulls the door early. To do so would be to invite praising pinholes, small moons of disappointment. The kiln is a friend you do not hurry from a story. Back in the workshop, the remaining pieces dry their skins to dullness that is a promise. The boy wipes the table with a damp cloth, washes the brush hairs, and lays them bristle up, and turns the bowl so a thin film can rest without cracking. The cutter notes in his book with a reed pen, stars white, kites green, lozenges blue, borders honey fired at mid-afternoon, wood vine, a little pine. He sets the compass on a clean towel and draws a circle for tomorrow's cutting while the kiln holds its breath behind them. Geometry returns like an old friend, calm and exact. It waits with him for open shelves and cold color. Morning comes back to the kiln as if it never left. Clay around the door is dry to the touch. The mark the cutter pressed yesterday keeps its quiet shape. He tests the warmth with the back of his hand. Heat lives there, gentle now like a dozing cat. The fireman loosens the clay seam with a wet knife. The boy lifts each door brick and hands it down. No hurry. They stack the bricks in a neat column that looks like a small square tower. First breath from the kiln carries sweetness of glaze and a memory of smoke. It is not hot enough to push. It is warm enough to greet. The witness shards wait by the spy hole, their dots turn to glass. The white is closed and soft, no pinholes, no pitting, just a skin that answers light with a mild shine. The green is leaf after rain. The blue is a calm deeper than ink. The cutter nods once. Shells come out one at a time. He uses long tongs padded with leather. Each shelf sings a low note when his knuckles touch it. Sound tells temperature as well as hand. On the first shelf, stars stand in white with edges clean. A few bare tiny points where stilts touched. He sets them on a board lined with straw. On the next shelf, the small kites glow green at their faces and pale where the tongs held them. Beyond, lozenges lie sky blue and even. Border tiles keep their honey. Nothing stuck, nothing warped. There is relief in the room that no one needs. They carry the boards into the workshop and set them on the rubbing table. At one corner sits a shallow dish of water and a smooth stone used to dress stilt marks. The cutter takes a white star and touches each little scar with the stone in slow circles. The sound is like a whisper someone decided to keep. He rinses the face with a damp cloth and holds it up to morning. The glaze shows a small, soft round where stilt once was. He rubs again and the round settles into the surface. Side note: every kiln leaves fingerprints. A good finisher does not hide them with paint. He persuades the glass to forget where it touched its cradle. The boy practices on a green kite. His circles are too quick at first. The cutter lays a hand over the boy's wrist and slows it. The mark melts into the glaze like ice into tea. They work through a board, then another. Edges that grew a little glass slip in firing are eased with a tile slip kept just for this. The faces get a light wipe with a cloth that lost its lint a long time ago. When pieces are ready, the cutter spreads a canvas on the floor and lays out the dry pattern one span from the wall. He carries over the plan board and weights its corners with small stones. Stars go first, then the kites tuck into the stars' angles, then lozenges step along and turn corners into lines. He checks distances with a string tied between to fine nails. The string hums when plucked. Plum is tested with a lemon-sized plum bob on a silk cord. The bob points toward the earth with a steady mind. The wall behind is chalked with a faint grid and a center line. The room is cool. Its windows look into a court where a rill of water crosses a floor of stone. Mortar is mixed in a low trough. Fine sand. Slaked lime. Water that is not hungry. The paddle turns the mass until it is even and calm. When the paddle stands, the surface slowly levels. They let it rest the time it takes to drink half a cup of tea. Side note: gypsum sets faster and lime sets slower. Builders here use both, according to the day. For slow rooms and thin joints, lime works with patience. For a quick border or a patch, gypsum makes a sure promise. Today is lime. The weather is kind. The wall has been brushed clean. A thin first coat sits there already, keyed with a comb so the next layer can hold. The cutter spreads a fresh bed with a trowel, no thicker than a barley grain. He works a square not big enough to race him, only big enough to keep pace with his breath. The trowel's back leaves a light sheen that will just begin to dull by the time the tile meets it. He lifts the first star, turns it in his hand, and paints a wash of thin slurry on the back with a short brush. Not a lake. A whisper. He sets the point of the star to the center mark and leans the rest into place with a small, kind wiggle so line and tile find each other. He withdraws his hand and the piece stays where it is asked to stay. A wooden straight edge checks its level against the next points on the chalk grid. True. Kites follow. The boy hands them in the order the floor pattern suggests. Each back gets its wash. Each face meets the wall with a press of thumb at the center, and gentle pressure at the corners. A thin sliver of cedar serves as a spacer where the joints want to widen. The cutter slides it in, then slides it out again, leaving just enough space for a breath of grout. He wipes the glaze faces with a wool pad damp enough to keep them clean, dry enough to avoid a run. The room keeps its voice low. The rill utters its one line. Someone crosses the court carrying a brass ewer. The light catches the metal and passes on. The cutter hums the scale of his pattern under his breath. Star, kite, kite, lozenge, star. The boy matches him without making sound. Calm grows as the field grows. A larger element appears on the plan board, a round medallion that interputs the grid and gathers it like a knot. For this, the cutter anchors a cord at the center point with a small nail and swings a light circle on the wall with the cord's charcoal end. He sets 4 stars on the circle at the compass points, then infills with small shapes so the edge turns like a quiet wheel. The medallion reads as a single thing even though it is many. Side note, eyes like circles. Geometry uses that and hides its work in plain kindness. When a span of the wall is set, they rest while the line takes its first thought about setting. The cutter sits on his heels and runs a finger across a joint. It is ready to accept grout. He mixes a thin paste of the same lime but sieved finer, almost as smooth as cream. He folds it with the trowel until it answers. With a narrow spoon he feeds the paste into the joints. The paste finds the path and settles. He runs a thumb along the line to dress it, and lifts the smear that remains on the glaze with the wool pad. The line closes to a hair. A test tap follows. He touches each tile face with the bone handle of his knife. Live pieces ring like small bells under cloth. A duller sound means more pressing is needed. He coaxes the bed with a fingertip at the corner and tests again. The sound brightens. The boy tries the tap and smiles when he hears the note change. The room seems to approve. By midday a field the length of a table has become long. The pattern is both busy and calm, like leaves held in a slow wind. The cutter stands back with his hands on his hips, thumbs tucked into his belt. He breathes. He does not say anything more than good. He checks the plumb once again, the bob points as before. He draws a damp cloth at a long stroke across the new face, not to scrub, only to kiss away lime bloom that sometimes wants to sit down too early. They move the pattern board along. The floor layout becomes the next section. Work repeats. Lift, wash, set, wiggle, wipe, spoon, smooth, tap. The day stretches in even lines. Light on the wall moves a hand's width and then a little more. When a breeze enters the room and touches the rill, a scatter of reflections climbs the new tiles and turns their surfaces into water for a moment. The cutter watches and laughs under his breath. The design wanted that. Water and shadow are part of the work, invited guests who never knock. Before stopping, he sets the first borders, honey tiles at the outer edge that frame the garden of shapes within. Their warmer tone makes the whites whiter, the greens greener, the blue softer. He presses a thin reed into the corner to make a neat cove where wall and border meet. He draws the reed out and the line holds. A last wipe, a last ring from the knife handle, and he steps back again. The boy cleans tools. Bowls are covered so skins will not crack. The trowel is scraped and dipped. The wool pad is rinsed and pressed between two boards so it dries flat. The room returns its color to late afternoon. The wall looks older than an hour, but not finished, which is honest. Patterns love patience. By the time the shade has climbed to the upper half of the wall, the field has a calm, repeating life. Stars breathe in white. Kites lean into green. Lozenges cross their spaces with evening blue. Now the frame must gather it, hold it, and give it a voice. The cutter sets a line with cord and charcoal to mark the pathway for the border. Honey tiles lie in stacks, each checked for a true edge. He dry fits a corner, then takes up a small saw and miters to pieces so they meet in a quiet seam that looks like a fold in paper rather than a cut in clay. Along the edge he lays a thin bed of line, smoother than milk, and presses the honey tiles into it with a steady, even hand. A cedar strip helps him keep a straight run. When he reaches the miters, he turns them toward one another with the gentleness reserved for lids and eggshells. The joint closes without language. He runs a damp fingertip along the angle, just once, to erase the smallest suggestion of a ridge. Above the honey band there will be a ribbon of script, not loud, not crowded. A single phrase that belongs to rooms and water, a brief wish for peace and well-being inside these walls. The letters will be Quffic upright measured, made for geometry's company. Side note, in these rooms, writing often becomes part of the architecture, not something added after. Script runs like a border, or a garden fence, or a low psalm along the ceiling. Quffic, with its firm strokes and even weight, reads clearly from a little distance, and behaves well with squares and stars. On a low table covered in paper that shows the grid of the wall at half scale, the cutter lays out the phrase with a thin reed and charcoal. He draws each letter as if building it from small stones, verticals like posts, horizontals like beams, small steps where a line needs to turn the corner. He pricks the drawing along its strokes with a fine needle and a steady hand, then sets the sheet aside to dry so the holes won't tear. Color is chosen with care. The ground will be white so the room keeps its cool head. The letters will be a brown so near to black that from afar it looks ink deep, yet up close it is warm, like walnut wood. The boy helps grind the color in a bowl once used for honey glaze. Water circles the powder until it becomes a quiet pool. They add a little clay so the mix will behave on small pieces and not crawl in firing. The letters are not painted, they are built. On the bench, the cutter lays thin glazed strips in the letter color long and evenly wide cut from tiles already fired. He slices short lengths from these strips and arranges them face down on a sheet of strong paper brushed with a breath of flour paste. The strokes follow the pounce pattern below. Each piece is placed with bamboo tweezers so the edges sit true. Corners become neat steps. Curves become small stairs that the eye will read as sweep once the band is viewed from the floor. Side note, this is a reverse setting method often used for bands. Tiny segments behave better on the table than on a wall, and the paste holds them steady until lime accepts them. Between strokes he sets white tesserae, also face down, to complete the rectangle of each repeat. The boy learns to breathe evenly, to let hands rest when they begin to hurry. They assemble one repeat of the phrase, then the next, like stitching a sentence on a lawn cloth. When a run the length of the wall is finished, he weights the sheet with tiles and allows the paste to take hold, but not harden just enough to carry the band without complaint. Back at the wall, He snaps a guideline above the honey border, marks the centers, and spreads a thin, waiting bit of line. The paper with face-down tesserae is offered up to the wall and tapped gently with a felt pad so each piece enters the mortar by the same small amount. The paper is peeled back at a slant. Some pieces cling. He coaxes them with a wooden wedge. The letters appear nearer first strokes backward and charming, then read true when a second band is lifted into place beside the first. He works along while adjusting small joints with a bone pick. A dot is moved a grain's width to make a word breathe. A vertical is persuaded to stand straighter with the touch of a fingernail. The boy keeps a damp wool pad ready and clears any line that smudges the glaze. Before the line stiffens, the cutter strokes along the top and bottom of the band with a narrow beading tool, making a fine, consistent channel that frames the script without shouting. Above the words he adds a slim repeat of blue lozenges on point, a simple echo of the field below. They pull the eye across and keep the band from floating. At each corner he composes a small knot of shape so the ribbon turns and keeps its temper. The border is now a walk around the garden, gold of honey at the path's edge, a sentence for blessing, then a thin sky of blue. The room changes around the work. Air cools as afternoon lengthens. The rill in the court, which has talked all day, sends a small spray of patterned light through the screen. It lands on the new glaze and walks there. The tiles answer by giving the light back in little pieces, breaking it into quiet movement. Side note: glazed surfaces brighten rooms not only by reflection, but by being easy for air and water. Lime walls breathe, and tile faces let the house be washed with a hand, a cloth, a bowl. When the band has set enough to tolerate a touch, the cutter takes out his polishing bag. It holds soft linen, a lump of chalk, a sliver of pumice worn smooth, and a pebble from the river that fits between finger and thumb. He dusts the face of the words with a whisper of chalk and strokes them with linen to lift any lingering bloom the faint film line sometimes leaves as it thinks and dries, where a still scar still shows on a white star. He rubs once with the pebble and then again with the cloth until the place answers like the rest. He wets a cloth and wrings it almost dry, then draws it across the field in a single, unbroken line from honey border to honey border. The cloth leaves a darkened path that fades in a breath. He does this not to clean alone, but to teach the room the surface. Water, glaze, lime all learning each other's habits. Footsteps pass in the colonnade. Soft soles, a pause, an appreciative syllable from someone looking in and then moving on. The boy glances toward the doorway, then back to the line of script. He traces a letter in the air and looks a little taller. They prepare the last lengths of honey border above the blue. Miters again, small coves again, a reed drawn once along the seam to soften it. The square within the frame is complete except for a small emptiness left on purpose, a window-sized rectangle where a lattice will go tomorrow. The cutter leads that gap as a breath in the wall, a place for air and looking. The pattern wants contrast, the open work will answer. Before day ends, he rounds the room with gentle taps of his knife handle. Bell, each face rings a little, and then becomes part of the room's hush. He writes in his book, borders set, script raised, blue run closed, line good, water kind today. He wipes the tools, turns the bowls, and covers the lime trough with a damp cloth so a skin will not grow. He brings the boy to the doorway, and they stand for a moment in the cooler air of the court. The wall behind them holds its new garden in a close, silent way. It already seems to have been there longer than a day. Night will lay itself across the glaze and leave it unchanged. In the morning, the joints will be ready for a final dressing, the lattice for its seat, and the floor for the thin dust the work has made. Then the face will meet water and shadow as part of the house's own breath, not simply as tile. Morning returns with a fresh edge to the air. The room is still. Lime has dreamed all night and grown a little harder. The cutter steps in softly and lays his palm against the wall as if greeting an old friend. Cool Blaze answers, his skin with a small chill. The joints look calm, faintly lighter than the faces, like threads between pieces of cloth. He begins with a dressing stick and olive switch shaved flat at one end and a shallow bowl of clear water. He draws the wet edge down each joint to smooth tiny ridges left by yesterday's thun. Where a corner swelled a grain's width, he coaxes lime back into line. The sound is small, a gentle paper scrape. Side note, lime cures by taking up breath from the air. It likes time. It rewards patience. Today's touch is light, so tomorrow's strength can be sure. At the medallion he checks the stairs of the letters. A dot sits too proud. He wets a cloth and presses slow and steady until the dot relaxes into its bed. He strokes along the top and bottom of the script band with a narrow beading tool once more so the channel stays even and will catch shadow in the same quiet way all the way along. The boy follows with the wool pad, not for scrubbing but for lifting faint boom the lime sometimes leaves at dawn. He moves in long unbroken strokes from border to border. The glaze deepens for a heartbeat under the damp, and then returns to its usual speech. In the court, the rill begins its morning line. A bird tries a few notes and decides that is enough. The reserved opening for the lattice waits like a held breath. On the bench by the window, a cedar panel leans against two pegs. Its pattern is a simple braid of diamonds and small flowers, cut with a fine saw and cleaned with a file soft as a whisper. The cutter runs a finger along the grain. Cedar answers with its calm centrezin and sun. He wipes the panel with a cloth touch to walnut oil. The wood drinks and shines a little, not to glare, just to glow. Side note, oil keeps cedar polite with air. It slows thirst and answers dust with ease. A shallow bed of lime along the opening's edge receives the panel. To tiny wedges at the jamb set it true. He taps them with a bone pick until the panel sits square and modest, neither pressing forward nor hiding. He draws a slender fillet of lime where wood meets glaze and smooths it with the round of a straw. The joint becomes a line you feel more than see. The boy holds the panel steady until the wedges decide to stay. They sweep the floor with a palm broom and gather yesterday's dust into a clay pan. The cutter takes up his knife and taps the faces once more lightly, lightly. Bell, bell, bell. A few notes are dull where joints still think. He lets them be. Lunch will change them. Afternoon will too. At the threshold, a jar waits with rainwater that has rested in a shaded corner. He dips a cloth and wrings it until almost dry. The first wash for a new wall is quiet. He draws the cloth in a single, careful path across the face. No circles. No hurry. Only a line that says good morning. Then he lays the cloth across a cord in the court to dry where the breeze can find it. Footfalls arrive in the corridor, soft leather, then bare feet. The master of the house steps in with his steward and a child who fits his hand in his sleeve and peers around him. The room's air has not yet warmed. The steward inhales and smiles at Cedar. The master lets his eyes walk the wall. He does not count shapes. He does not need to. His eyes find the medallion and go on. They settle on the small script and rest there. He nods once. It reads, he says, and the boy glows. Tea arrives in little bowls that are not yet entirely cool. They stand at the door and sip. No one touches the wall. The cutter is glad for that. The steward asks about care. The cutter answers easily. Water, a soft cloth, and shade, no sand, no lie, no rush. Once in a while, a breath of oil on the cedar. That is all. He adds, almost as a secret, that Lime appreciates windows open more than closed. Houses like to breathe. When the visitors go, the cutter kneels at the very bottom corner near the floor, where honey meets white. He takes a tiny chisel and turns a lozenge end for end, not in the wall but on his drawing board. He looks at the wall and then at the board, then smiles and puts the chisel away. He will leave the wall without a boast. His mark, if there is one, is already present, a lozenge shaved a breath thinner than its sisters, tucked low where a broom will not find it, where only a maker's eye would rest. Side note, some hands hide signatures in care rather than in signs. A joint that never opens. A border that always returns true. That is enough. By midday the joints have firmed. He mixes a thin wash of lime and water milk to the color of cloud and brushes it once over the joints only, keeping glazed faces clean. The wash evens the tone and seals tiny pores at the line. The band of words takes the light with a soft hand now, neither swallowing it nor throwing it back. It simply holds it and makes it quiet. He opens the lattice to the court. Air moves through. A pattern of shade lands on the new glaze and lays a second design across the first. The room understands both at once. In the court, someone pours a pitcher of water into the channel. The rule's voice grows, and the ripple climbs the tiles, not in wet but in light. It looks like leaves moving on a clear night when the breeze changes its mind. The boy, sent to fetch the lunch basket, returns and sets out bread and dates, and a small dish of cheese with herbs folded into it. They sit on the low step and eat without talking much. Work has given them a full tongue already. Afterward the boy washes the bowls in a bucket and tips the gray water onto the herbs in the court. The stems lift a little, pleased. In the afternoon, footsteps begin to learn the new edge. A servant enters with a jug and pauses as the room's coolness touches her face. She hums once and adjusts the jug's weight. When she turns, the glaze throws a small, soft moon onto the jug's belly. She carries the moon out with her without knowing. The cutter writes a last note in his book, face washed, lattice set, joints dressed, oil at Cedar. Room bright and quiet. He closes the book and ties it with a cord. Tools are cleaned and put back where they live, trowel wiped and hung, straight edge lean true, wool pad pressed flat between two boards, bowls nested, pebble returned to the bag. The bench is brushed and the sweepings carried to the lime pit. The door is left open the width of a hand for the afternoon air to finish the curing that ours began. He stands one more moment before the wall, not from pride, but from a simple habit of seeing a thing as it will be used. Tomorrow, someone will run a cloth along a border while telling a story to a child. Next week, steam from a winter pot will roll over the faces and turn to water and back again. In summer, the room will hold its cool like a kept promise. The work is less sculpture than service. Tile is a way a house can keep kindness ready. He steps into the court. Sun sits lower now. Water moves. The lattice writes its slender script on the flagstones. Behind him, the wall keeps its garden safe and ordinary. And as the cool geometry rests in its frame and the cedar breathes a faint sweet note, we travel with the light north and west to sea air and tall trees, where hands soften bark into ribbon and a hat brim learns the shape of rain. The morning is gray in the calm way of the coast. Clouds rest on the shoulders of the hills. The tide thinks about turning and then stays as it is. The longhouse breathes out a ribbon of smoke that smells of older and old stories. In the edge of the forest, cedar holds the night's damp in its hanging sprays. The bark is cool and the trunks keep quiet company with one another. This is the season for taking only what is needed and taking it well. Our weaver stands with her hand on a straight red cedar. She waits, not long, just enough for breath to match the hush around her. A small bundle rides in a spruce root basket at her feet, a bone all wrapped in buckskin, a flat antler wedge polished by many palms, a short cedar mallet, a narrow knife with a quiet edge, and a coil of soft cord to bind what is gathered. Her hair is braided and tied back with a strip of old bark. Her sleeves are rolled. The morning has time for this. She looks up to judge the height where the strip should begin. A cut too low will catch on every fern. Too high and the pull is awkward and harsh on the shoulder. She chooses a place at her own reach and a little more. With the knife, she scores a shallow line across the bark skin no wider than her hand. The cut does not circle the tree. It stops cleanly, leaving the bark's highway open all around. Side note, a full ring would harm the living flow. The work is to share, not to wound. Only a long ribbon will come away, and the tree will keep its good health. The antler wedge enters the first small mouth the knife has made. The mallet taps soft, soft until the wedge sits. With her fingers she finds the place where outer and inner bark part from each other, like two sheets of paper with a breath of air between. The outer layer is brown, weathered, and strong. The inner is pale, smooth, and new. She will take the inner. She leans back and asks the tree for a ribbon the width of 2 hands. The bark answers with a slow, even sigh. The strip rises. She walks backward, steady, feet careful on cedar roots and sword ferns. The ribbon widens, and then steadies into the width she asked, where it tries to wander. Her free hand guides it back. The surface is light in color and faintly damp. It smells clean, like rain kept for a long time. When the strip reaches above her head, she pauses and settles the curve over her shoulder. Then she walks again. The ribbon chooses its own length. When it begins to thin, she listens and stops before it breaks in a way that feels unkind. The top of the strip narrows to a tail. She trims the tail smooth and pats the trunk with her open hand. The ribbon lies on the ferns like a path she has just walked. She kneels beside it and begins to split it, outer from inner, tough from tender. Fingers do most of the talking, with help from the bone knife only where a stubborn thread will not let go. The outer bark she rolls tightly, useful later for rope or fire. The inner she handles, as if it remembers the tree's breathing, because it does. She pulls long, even lengths that curl by themselves into easy coils. Each coil she ties with a soft twist of cord so it will not spring apart. When she finishes the strip, she has several pale circles the size of a braided crown. She gathers another ribbon from a second tree at a respectful distance. No two from the same trunk today. When the bundle feels right in the crook of her arm, neither small nor greedy, she looks again at each tree, a simple glance the way people look at a friend's face before leaving. On the ground where she worked, she smooths the ferns back into their own shape. The forest closes the small space as if it were a sigh. Back along the path, the ground softens under spruce and hemlock. The coils ride against her hip, light and polite. She walks through a fringe of salal, berries not yet ripe hold tight in their cups. A raven says one dry word and then another. The tide finally decides to turn. The longhouse timbers show themselves between trunks, red and dark, steady as cliff and boat together. Inside the doorway, warmth meets the cool bark with a small sound almost like a tiny drink as mist moves away. Children count fish bones in a corner and make patterns. Someone stirs a pot and lifts the lid just enough to test the steam with a cheek. The weaver sets her coils on a cedar mat near the hearth, not too close, so warmth can be a friend and not a thief. Bark that dries too quickly grows brittle and opinionated. Bark that rests with a little warmth relaxes and learns to listen. She fills a low wooden trough with water warm to friendly, not hot. The smooth inner bark lengthens at the touch, each strip growing loose and supple, like a ribbon that remembers dancing. With both hands she dips and lifts, letting the water run away before setting each strip on a peg to breathe. As the damp leaves, she takes one coil and rubs it between her palms, not hard, but long enough that fibers open and lie alongside one another. The sound is like a soft brush on a drum. Side note, cedar inner bark becomes what you ask of it, if you ask with patience. It can be strong like rope or soft like cloth, depending on how it is split, soaked, and rubbed. The same tree that carries storms can also make a cradle band that feels kind on a child's skin. When the coil has been woken by water and hands, she tests a narrow strand. She bends it into a U and listens. It does not crack. She bends it into a small circle and watches. It lies flat and does not leap. She smiles and lays it with its brothers. A strand like this will take a pattern well. It will also take correction kindly when a line forgets itself. She prepares the warp for a brim, the beginning circle for a rain hat that will make a small roof for a face. On the mat she arranges stout, even strands like spokes of a wheel, their ends weighted with smooth stone so they will not wander. Over under, the first weft goes, not for beauty but for a truthful start. The circle finds itself. The center becomes a tidy knot of crossings, firm but not hard. She tugs each spoke until tension agrees. From a basket she lifts a small twist of dyed bark matter, red, made from alder, dyed strands rubbed with mineral and married to a wash of berry fixed in the sun. It is not loud, only warm, like a ember seen through ash. She tucks the red among the pale strips and tries a short run of color to see how it wants to join. It sits like a thin smile. She will leave it for later rows, a quiet line to mark the turn from crown to brim. The fire settles and sighs. The room smells of wood smoke and coast rain. A neighbor steps in, shakes off mist at the threshold, and sets a small gift by the door, a shell spoon with a chip on one edge and still true on the other. The weaver nods thanks without looking up. Her hands keep the circle's language. The first part of the brim grows no more than the size of an open hand before she stops. Cedar does not like to be hurried into shape. It prefers a rhythm that feels like the tide, a little work, a little rest, another little work. She gathers the damp cloth around the corals again so they will not dream into stiffness while she eats. A bowl of salmon soup waits near the hearth. Steam rises. She breaks a piece of dried kelp into the bowl, and the sea wakes in the broth in a small, clear way. She eats slowly, watching the circle on the mat as if it were a baby finding sleep. The day will lean forward into measuring, shaping, and the first true rose. For now the forest's ribbon has become a room's work. The hat has started, as all roofs start, in the mind, in the hands, and in circles that agree to hold. After the meal, the room returns to its quiet work song. The fire taps a small rhythm in the hearth. Beyond the walls, the tide turns and sighs against pebbles. The weaver unwinds a coil and tests each strand with a long pull, feeling for thin places or sleepy twists. Where a fiber resists, she rolls it between thumb and forefinger until it remembers its straightness. She sets the warp circle before her once more and settles on the mat, knees tucked back easy, the way a river settles into its bed. The brim begins with patience. She chooses 3 even weft strands, lays them together, and starts a fine, tight twining over and under the spokes. Twist, carry, tuck. Twist, carry, tuck. The motion is small and friendly. Each cross lies snug against the last, no gaps, no hurry. The circle grows outward by the width of a little finger. She pauses and smooths the new row with the heel of her hand to set the memory. Side note: cedar learns shape through steady pressure more than force. Firm touch, then rest, teaches the curve to stay. To keep the brim round, she uses a simple gauge slip of driftwood shaved to a narrow strip with a notch at one end. She checks the distance from center to edge at 4 points and nudges a spoke this way or that so the circle holds true. A brim that wobbles now will argue later. She would rather have agreement while the hat is only the size of a plate than correction when it is the size of a wheel. A child pads across the floor and sits nearby, hands full of shells. He watches without speaking, then holds up his longest shell to match the length of a weft. Almost, she says, and the shell becomes a ruler for a moment. He makes a line of shells on the mat like a row of small moons, and then, satisfied, carries them off to invent a game where they become fish. She lays a narrow band of color. Not loud, only a quiet signal. From a small bundle she lifts a darker strand, bark colored with alder, and a wash of iron-rich mud gathered where stream meets shore. It wears a calm brown-black. She introduces it with 2 turns among the pale cedar, then returns to the soft gold of the natural fibers. The line reads as a whisper, the way a horizon does just after rain when the sea agrees to be smooth. Next she makes the brim think about sloping. A rain hat needs to send water away from the face. The brim must learn to lean. She lengthens every fifth stitch by a grain and extra twist here, a looser lay there so the edge begins to tip downward. She does this not in a ring, but as a slow spiral, so no part of the brim feels asked to bend alone. The spiral carries the message around, and the edge accepts it with good timing. Side note, many hats are shaped by these slight, regular choices rather than by strong bends. The eye does not see the plan, but the hand feels it. She opens a fresh coil and splits it into finer strands by pulling along the grain. The sound is a soft sigh like silk. Finer weft means smoother curves. She rubs the divided fibers with a damp cloth and twists them together just enough to keep them cousins rather than strangers. A good weft behaves like a well-braided story, separate lines that agree to travel. The longhouse door lifts with a hand and settles again. A neighbor steps in, places a small bundle of burgrass near the edge of the mat, and nods. The blades lie pale and sleek as thin ice. When cured and rubbed, they hold a strong light, and when dyed, they carry a deep, steady dark. The weaver thanks her with a glance. She will use only a little today for a fine line at the brim's turn. Side note, some weavers mix cedar inner bark with other plant fibers for contrast and strength. Burgrass, for example, accepts dye well and keeps its crispness in damp weather. She warms the burgrass between palms and rolls it until it feels like ribbon. A short bath in the trough smooths its breath. Then she tucks in a single strand to mark the place where the brim will later meet the crown. The contrast is quiet, a slender gleam that will catch light when rain passes and the world goes silver. The day leans forward. She twines 3 more rows, then rests her hands on her thighs. Cedar likes to pause. She hums low in her throat, a tune that is not a song, just a comfortable line of notes. She stands, stretches her back, and walks to the doorway. The air smells of beach stones and kelp, of smoke and fish on the rack. She watches a gull right a slow curve, and then return to the same place to do it again, as if teaching the sky its outline. When she returns to the mat, it is time for pattern to wake. She lays 2 shallow baskets on the floor, one filled with pale cedar strands, one with darker ones. On a small board, she draws a simple map with charcoal the mountains pattern, stepped triangles climbing and falling in an even run. The design is old and friendly. It holds rain in its spaces and gives it back to the eye changed. She sets a stone on the board to keep it still, though she knows the pattern by heart. Color begins as a small promise. Every 4th stitch she replaces the pale with the dark, and then returns to pale for 3. The next row, she moves the dark 1 step to the right. The steps climb. A mountain forms, not in one row, but in the patience of many. With the same steady breath she builds its neighbor. Between them she leaves a valley the width of 2 fingers. The rhythm is simple enough that her hands can follow it while her mind stays soft and open. This is work made for listening. Side note, patterns on hats often carry meanings: mountains, salmon bones, waves, and also serve as a kind of ledger. A weaver may know by the count of triangles where she is in her day, or by a sequence of colors when to restock a coil or shift her stitch. Pattern is both beauty and a practical clock. The brim widens to the width of her palm and a little more. She lifts it gently and lays it on a round form, a shallow hoop carved from drift cedar to let the curve set as it dries. The hoop is not a strict master, it is only a reminder of the hat's future. She ties the brim at 4 places to keep it true and leaves it to breathe. While it listens to air, she prepares the first courses of the crown. The crown asks for a different voice. The stitches must climb now, not just travel outward. She lifts the brim, sets it upright like a small fence, and begins twining across the ready edge, bringing the weft upward with a slight pull every 2 stitches. The fabric responds, turning like a bowl taught to be a roof. The transition is where skill lives. Too sharp a turn and the crown will pucker, too soft and it will sag toward the eyes. She uses the burgrass line as her guide. Each time it peeks from beneath a new row, she knows the slope is holding. Outside, a soft rain begins, the kind that does not announce itself, only appears on the threshold as a darker shade of light. The roof ticks. The room grows the clean smell of weather. She keeps weaving. Cedar drinks the damp from the air and becomes even more agreeable, as if pleased to meet its old companion. When the crown reaches the height of 2 hands, she pauses to add a hidden strength, a narrow cord laid inside a row not seen from the outside, but felt by the fingers if they search. The cord is twisted from strong outer bark and rubbed smooth. It will help the hat remember its slope after many days in weather and many nights near the fire. She works the cord in with a calm rhythm, and then returns to plain twining. By late afternoon, the hat shows its future clearly. The brim slopes like a small hillside. The crown rises like a gentle mound. Along the turn, the thin burgrass line glows. Near the brim's edge, the mountains step in a calm procession that circles back to greet itself. She strokes the surface with both palms to set the fibers. The hat answers with a soft whisper that sounds like tide on fine sand. She lays the work to rest again, covers the coils with damp cloth, and feeds the fire with 2 pieces of alder. Evening will be for trimming small hairs, for whispering the surface smooth, and for deciding where a second pattern, like salmon bones, might live without crowding the first. For now the day has offered shape, and the beginning of story. The hat has learned to lean, to climb, and to carry a horizon. Evening sits softly on the rafters. The fire has settled to a low, friendly glow, and the longhouse holds a steady hush. The hat waits on its hoop like a small moon caught in a wooden ring. The weaver lifts it with 2 hands, thumbs inside, fingers reading the surface for the little stories that must be smoothed away. First comes trimming. Cedar, even when split fine and rubbed, grows tiny hairs where the blade passed. She takes a shell spoon that chipped one by the door and turns it in her palm until the smooth edge finds her hand's line. With that edge she strokes the hat's skin from crown to brim in quiet lanes, like combing a lake when the wind has forgotten to move. The shell does not cut. It presses and coaxes. Loose fibers lie down. Strays take their place in the weave. The sound is a breath, nothing more. Where a hair refuses, she touches it with the very tip of a knife, and then strokes again with the shell. The surface learns grace by degrees. Side note, burnishing with shell or bone adds patience to the weave. It closes small doors where rain would like to enter, and it gives the hat a touch of shine without making it stiff. She warms a clean pebble near the hearth. When it holds gentle heat, she passes it over the crown in circles, never resting long in one place. The warmth tells the fibers to settle their quarrels. They agree. Under her hand the crown grows calm and even, the slope as steady as a tide line on a beach that does not think about storms. Now she turns the hat upside down. The inner face shows the tidy ladders of twining, each rung equal, each step true. Here she will add a quiet comfort, a headband. She chooses soft, thin strands and twists them into a flat braid the width of 2 grains of rice. Rubbing the braid between damp palms brings a humane softness, the feel of cloth that knows skin. She stitches this band just inside the crown where brow will meet brim, tucking it under row so it hides, but remains kind in use. A hat is a tool, and tools remember kindness. She brings up a little plan for pattern she sketched earlier, the salmon bone design, a line of short angles repeating like the memory of ribs. It will live between the mountain steps. A company that does not compete, she measures the distance with the driftwood gauge and marks a starting place with a single dark thread tied around a spoke. Then she begins the dance. Dark, pale, 2 forward, 1 back. The angles rise, lean, and return, a quiet zigzag that reads as bone to those who know and as rhythm to any eye. She counts without pressing numbers hard, just a familiar hum that keeps her place. When a child asks what she hums, she says, nothing, which is true, and also says everything, which is also true. The salmon bone line walks the hat once and comes around to greet itself, ends tucked so neatly they seem to have always been there. The crown must reach its full height. To climb without tilt, she changes the stitch just a little. Every 3rd stitch pulls up a hair more than its neighbor. The rise is slow, the way light climbs a wall at morning. She adds a second hidden cord, like the first, buried in a row a hand above the burgrass line. This cord carries strength around the head. It is a circle of memory. When wind and wet ask the hat to forget its shape, the cord will answer, we remember. The longhouse door lifts and sevels. A small drift of damp air follows a cousin inside. He sets a bundle of thin spruce roots near the mat. They have been soaked and scraped clean. Their smell is fresh and a little sweet, like a basket that has known rain and sun both. She thanks him with a nod. The roots will serve well for the final edging, and for ties if the wearer asks. Before finishing the climb, she invites water to speak. The hat has not yet met weather. She wishes the introduction to be polite. She carries it to the doorway and holds it under the eave where the rain drops at a measured pace. Not a soak, a greeting. Drops tick the brim, find the slope, and slide obediently to the floor. None linger. The salmon bone pattern darkens by a shade and then returns as it dries. The burgrass line catches a bead and lets it go. Side note, cedar's gift is not fear of water but friendliness with it. Properly prepared, it sheds what it must and keeps what is needed. Back by the fire, she resumes the crown. Row by row, with the same steady twining, she lifts the roof a finger, and then a finger more. When she tries the hat on her own head, it sits with a rightness that needs no mirror. She tips it forward and backward, then side to side. The brim's shadow follows her eyes, but does not steal the view. She listens for any stiff place that presses. There is none. She listens for any lazy place that sags. There is none. She lifts it off and sets it again on the hoop. Content. Now the finishing edge. The outer rim deserves a binding that closes its story. She chooses 3 spruce root strands and warms them between damp cloths until they move like string with purpose. Splicing them into a round is quiet work of thumbs and patience. She lays the round onto the brim's lip and stitches it through with fine cedar weft, over one, under one, all the way around. Each stitch is small and exact. When the circle meets its own beginning, she eases the strands together so the join feels like part of the same breath. The rim looks no different from any other place, which means it is finished well. She considers ties. Some hats travel with a pair of cords that rest under the jaw in wind or heavy rain. For those she twists to narrow cording ropes from cedar inner bark and rolls them on her thigh until the twist locks. She stitches them beneath the inner headband on opposite sides, letting them hang in soft loops. If the wearer prefers to let them ride behind the head instead, they will be there waiting. The hat asks for a last conversation with smoothness. She takes out a small bone pick and touches the intersections where tension shows a tiny gap. A gentle nudge brings neighbors nearer. She strokes again with the shell spoon. The crown answers with that same fine whisper that has become a friend today. To mark the maker without speaking loudly, she threads 1 hair-thin strand of red-dyed bark into the inner band and ties it in a small, flat knot. It shows only if you look for it. A signature that does not need an audience. Near the door, the rain softens to mist. She steps outside and lifts the hat to the air. The hills were their best gray. The harbor holds more sky than water now. She places the hat on her head and walks once to the beach and back. Pebbles answer underfoot. The brim sheds, the crown breeze, and the world feels agreeable from beneath its shade. Returning, she hangs the hat on a peg where warmth can kiss it but not make demands. Overnight it will learn the room's breath and forget the troughs. Inside, she gathers the leftovers, short ends, trimmed hairs, the stiff outer bark roll. Nothing leaves the circle of usefulness. Short ends will pad a cradle strap. Trimmings will start tomorrow's fire and give it the scent of the forest. Outer bark will become a firm tie for bundles that must stay true in travel. She closes the day by smoothing the mat with both palms, a gesture of gratitude to the ground that has held her work. Then she covers the remaining coils with damp cloth, wrings the cloth, and covers them again until they feel like night-touching river stones. The hat is not done, but it is close enough to dream of its task. It has met water, learned its height, and found its mountain steps and salmon bones. Tomorrow will bring the last rose and a gentle test in a stronger rain. The day after will bring a face that will call it useful. Dawn rinses the longhouse in a cool gray. The fire, coaxed with a few older sticks, answers with a low, agreeable flame. On its peg, the hat has kept the shape it learned yesterday. The brim leans with purpose. The crown stands with an easy rise. The weaver lifts it down and feels the weight in her hands light, alive and ready for its last lessons. She begins with closing the crown. The climb has brought the walls to a height that suits a steady rain. Now the top must gather to a small calm circle. She chooses finer weft. Split thin as an eyelash and rub smooth. Every second stitch shortens just a little. The rows step inward, not in a hurry, only in steady agreement. She guides the pull with 2 fingers set like a measuring fork. When the circle is the size of a coin, she threads a narrow spruce root draw through the final course and draws it in by degrees. There is no knot with a tail. The root tucks into itself and rests like a closed eye. At the very top she adds a keeper round, flat button woven from a small bundle of cedar weft twined tightly and stitched down. It is no decoration that shouts. It is a small promise that the crown will stay polite under years of wet. She rubs the button with a smooth pebble until it holds a shy shine. Around the line where crown meets brim, she sets a finishing braid. She twists 3 strands to pale cedar, one darkened with alder dye between damp palms, until they feel like a river braid that knows the rocks under it. The braid rides the turn like a horizon and is sewn in with fine stitches, one every thumb's breadth. It is both belt and memory, a quiet reinforcement that tells water which way to go. The ties she made yesterday need a companion piece. She twists a longer strap from inner bark and a thin thread of burgrass laid in the core. Rolling on her thigh sets the twist. She anchors this strap to one side of the headband and threads a small toggle to the other short piece of antler drilled and sanded smooth as a seed. When the strap loops the toggle, it holds without asking for attention, and it frees with one hand. Side note, toggles and simple loops often make better closures than knots in cold weather. They answer the fingers kindly when breath is a cloud. She turns the hat inside out once more for a last, careful inspection. The inner rungs are even. The hidden cords sit gentle and true. She strokes the headband. It is soft and cooperative. The spruce root rim shows no proud join. A few crossings except a nudge from the bone pick. And then there is nothing left to correct. Now it should meet honest rain. She steps outside. Morning has decided to be wet without fuss. Drops fall with the weight of oats. She puts on the hat. The burgrass line above her brow glows faintly, and the brim sends water outward in small sheets. It does not drip in an even teeth. It writes a clean edge. She tilts her head left and right. The water follows the slope as planned and leaves her face alone. After a slow walk along the path to the beach and back, the crown is damp on its skin but dry at its heart. She removes the hat, turns it in her hands, and smiles a brief, private smile that uses more breath than teeth. By mid-morning a breeze threads the channel. It is not a gale. It is a narrow wind that comes in pulses, as if following the lane of a gull. She walks to the point where the shore meets open water. The air carries salt and a trace of kelp. She sets the hat on again and lets the wind ask its questions. The brim answers with a firm lean, not a fight. The spruce root rim makes a small, contented click when a stronger pulse lifts the edge and lets it settle again. The chin strap loops to the toggle and keeps its promise. Her hair stays in its place. Her eyes remain a room out of the weather, able to see the gray sea keep its long, slow breath. Side note, a good brim does not catch wind. It offers wind a slide and a farewell. Back home, she sets the hat by the fire at a respectful distance. The surface dries without tightening, the way a good drum dries when watched. She combs the remaining corals and wastes nothing. Small ends become a future start. The longest leftovers roll into a new bundle and lie under damp cloth to sleep. Near noon, a soft knock. The door cover lifts. A man stands just inside, carrying the smell of boat wood and tide. He is a cousin by marriage, a keeper of a small canoe with a narrow mast and a steady arm on the paddle. He removes his old hat-attired thing with a wavering brim and holds it by the edge. It has kept company through many rains and knows the shape of many days, but it asks for rest now. They sit near the doorway, where light is good. She places the new hat in his hands. He turns it once, twice, reading it with the same attention he would give a line of water. He tries it on. The burgrass line marks his brow as if it were drawn for him. He tips his head forward, then back, then to the side. The mountains along the brim circle him like familiar hills. The salmon bone pattern finds its rhythm above his eyes. He works the toggle once, twice, to learn it with his fingers. The exchange is quiet and plain. He lays a bundle wrapped in clean kelp on the mat. Inside are strips of smoked salmon and a small jar sealed with bladder full of rendered oil that will burn without fuss. Beside it he sets a coil of clean, strong line outer bark twisted true and a little row of bone needles, neatly drilled and polished. They are not payment so much as balance. He takes nothing away that he does not return in useful weight. Before he goes, they speak a little of care. Do not cook the hat by the fire. Feed it cool water now and then. Let it rest hanging, not folded. If a roll lifts, press it with warm hands and a shell's smooth edge. If the toggle loosens, visit again. The words are ordinary. They are also a kind of blessing. He leaves with the hat on his head. The brim writes a shade over his eyes that makes the day feel thoughtful. At the threshold he pauses, turns, and lifts to fingers and thanks. Then he is a steady shape along the path, then a small figure at the beach, then a moving knot in a canoe that greets the water like a friend it sees each day. The afternoon opens into simple chores. The weaver rinses a coil or two, splits a new length just to hear the sigh it offers, and lays away tools. Shell spoon in its place. Bone pick wrapped in cloth. Pebble on the hearth's edge where it will remember warmth but not hoard it. She writes nothing, but her hands have kept the record. Toward evening, a mist begins again, and from the channel a low wind finds its lane between the outer islands. It is the kind that asks hats to prove their shape. She steps to the doorway and watches. On the water, small white questions appear and disappear on the backs of waves. The canoe is a dark leaf, suring its course. The new hat is only a thought over the cousin's brow from this distance, but its brim line shows clean and untroubled. The toggle does what toggles do. Nothing is heroic. Everything is correct. She returns to the mat and smooths it with both palms. Tomorrow she will begin a child's basket with a soft lip and a pattern like rain at night. For now the house smells of older smoke and cedar's green memory. The hat has gone to its work. The room is lighter by its absence and heavier by the story it leaves. The new hat learns its weeks one shoreline at a time. It rides to the eelgrass beds at low tide and to the outer rocks when the swell stays polite. Rain greets it often. Sun less so. The cousin wears it in an ordinary way, no ceremony, no fuss. He sets the chin strap when the channel suggests it. He lifts the brim with a small thumb when he needs to squint without narrowing his eyes. The hat answers each small request as if it knew the script already. Early days teach the easy lessons. When a soft rain falls, The brim writes a single line of water, neat as the edge of a fish scale. When the wind moves in pages light, then light again, then a heavier hand the brim turns, leans, and resumes, never catching, only guiding. The burgrass band above the brow warms to the wearer and takes his shallow marks as a map. It does not complain. The cousin keeps to a simple care. After each trip he hangs the hat by its headband on a peg away from hard heat. He rubs it once with warm hands as if greeting a dog that understands kindness. He touches the spruce root rim with his fingertips to feel whether the round remains true. It does. Some mornings he wets palm and leaves a few quiet pauses on the crown, then lets air finish the work. A hat appreciates a small drink now and then, the way a floor of cedar appreciates a damp cloth more than a dry shout. On the third week the hat meets a proper rain. The cousin rows into a light down-channel wind that carries steady water. At the kelp line he lifts the sail. Drops stitch the sea without hurry. The brim draws a silver curtain and lets it go. He smiles without making a show. At day's end he shakes the hat once, one single shrug, and sets it on the peg. The crown is damp on the skin, dry in the bones. Cedar remembers, so does spruce root, so does the small hidden cord that keeps circles honest. Not every day is salt. Some are wood. He walks under trees that keep their conversations in needles. A light branch leans and gives the brim a small scrape. Cedar shows the mark at once, the way skin shows a brush with a nettle. Back home he touches the place with the shell spoon's curve, then with warm palm and slow circles. The lifted hair lies down again. The mark learns to be a memory instead of a fresh complaint. Side note, many materials prefer the question, will you soften, to the command, be smooth. Cedar is one of them. On a calm afternoon, he carries salmon home on a willow rod. The hat rides above the quiet smell of fish and alder smoke. A neighbor woman with a laugh that finds the corners of a room and makes them stay calls from her doorway and asks to see the hat. He lifts it with two hands and holds it out as if it were a sleeping bird. She turns it and reads what it says. Mountain steps, salmon bones, a burgrass line that sits where the brow asked for cool shade. She runs a thumb along the inner band and nods. Kind, she says, which is higher praise than beautiful on working days. Mending arrives as all mending does, a small need that asked for a small reply. A child borrows the hat to fetch driftwood near the tide line. In play, the child lifts the brim too high, too hard. One crossing opens a finger's width, not a tear, only a yawn where the pattern wishes to stay awake. The cousin does not scold. He shows the child the open place, and together they walk to the weaver. She has been working on a basket with a lip like a low wave. A thin coil of bark soaks in a wooden bowl. When she sees the hat, she knows its surface, as if she were seeing a friend in different clothes. She sets it on her knee, finds the open crossing with a listening touch, and draws out the small repair bundle she keeps near the door. It is a grass-wrapped roll, simple as a sandwich, a bone pick, a shell spoon, two short coils of cedar weft, a length of spruce root thread, a spare toggle, a pinch of alder dye, and a rag the size of a hand. She warms the weft in water until it answers with pliant patience. She opens the yarn just enough to invite the new strand through. The bone pick leads the way like a polite finger. One pass, then a second, and the line closes. She stones it with the pebble's smooth face. The repair says here if you know where to look, otherwise it says nothing at all. The child watches the hands and learns a first rule. Things that work also rest. Things that rest also work better tomorrow. The weaver gives the child a short length of outer bark to twist, to know the difference between attention and force. It becomes a rope that remembers the fingers that made it. The child ties it into a loop and loops it around the wrist with pride, not possession. A week stretches and shrinks the way weeks do when there is always something to carry and always something to prepare. The cousin leaves early more than once, hat on his head, to check set lines or to watch the waters change at the mouth of the inlet. He returns sometimes with only a memory of wind and sometimes with work riding in the bottom of the canoe. The hat hangs where it belongs and gathers a thin, clean scent, smoke that has learned manners, salt that knows how to be quiet, cedar that remembers rain. Another small care. The cousin rubs a tracing of sea oil along the spruce root rim with his thumb. Not a coat. A whisper. The rim drinks enough and refuses the rest. Side note, there is a difference between feeding and drowning a material. Cedar and spruce root prefer feeding. Late in the month, the weaver prepares a travel bundle for the cousin to keep under the seat board of his canoe. She wraps it in fish skin, scraped and dried to a soft, tough envelope. Inside she lays a coil of thin weft, the short length of burgrass, a sliver of spruce root, the small bone pick, a pebble the size of a hazelnut, and a twist of alder dye wrapped in paper. She ties the bundle with outer bark and shows him how to close it 3 ways so it will not open when the canoe sneezes. Your hat will speak now and then, she says. Answer in small words. He does. He answers by touching, by pressing, by smoothing, by letting the hat rest when rest makes more sense than more use. The brim keeps its true circle. The crown keeps its quiet. The mountain steps remain steps. The salmon bones continue their patient march above the brow. The tobble knows its hole by heart. As summer leans toward a quieter season, berries blush in low woods. The cousin and 2 relatives move along the slope with baskets that give back the smell of cedar and rain. The hat writes shade over his eyes while he works. A bee mistakes the burgrass line for a flower and then changes its mind without discussion. A breeze from the water walks the slope slowly as if reading the ground for old stories and goes away satisfied. In the evening the cousin returns the way he came, hat light on his head, baskets heavy in his hands. The weaver sits near the doorway with her shell spoon, smoothing the lip of the child's small practice basket. They trade a nod, then a few easy words that leave no sharp corners in the air. Good hat, he says, which is praise enough. Good hands, she replies, which is also true. When night puts its careful hands on the longhouse, the weaver hangs her tools where they sleep. The bone pick under the edge of the mat. The shell spoon by the door. The smooth pebble near the hearth. She dampens the basket coils and covers them with a cloth that holds the day's warmth. The house smells of cedar and fish, of wood that has worked and will work again tomorrow. The hat is not a hero. It is a circle of patience that learned weather and learned ahead. In time it will grow a color like honey at the edge, like fresh tea at the crown. It will know a few more mends, a few more rubs of the hand, a few more days when rain writes on it and wind reads from it. It will outlast shirts and shoes. It might welcome a second owner when the cousin grows old, and a grandchild's brow asks for the same shape. For now it sits on its peg, a small roof that remembers a tree. The weaver smooths the mat, the fire sighs, and the house breathes the slow breath of people who have taught their tools what to do and have been taught back gently by those same tools. Now these stories will keep you company as you rest. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams.